You've probably studied English for months, maybe even years. You've learned grammar, you've memorized vocabulary, you've watched countless lessons. But here's the truth: you don't need another grammar lesson. You don't need another vocabulary list. And you definitely don't need another English course, because none of those things are the real reason you're still struggling to speak English. There's one crucial step between studying English and actually using it in a real conversation, and most learners never discover it. That's why they know so much English but still hesitate when it's time to speak. In this video, you'll discover that missing step and learn how to turn everything you already know into smooth, natural English. Once you understand this process, studying will no longer feel separate from speaking. It will finally become part of it. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The day English stops feeling like a school subject. Every English learner reaches a point where studying harder stops producing better results. You finish another lesson, learn another grammar rule, memorize more vocabulary, and even score well on practice exercises. But when someone asks you a simple question in English, your mind suddenly slows down. You know the words, you understand the grammar, yet speaking still feels difficult. That's because studying and speaking are two completely different skills. One helps you collect knowledge. The other teaches you how to use that knowledge naturally in real time. Many learners believe that if they keep studying long enough, speaking will eventually happen on its own. It seems logical, but language doesn't work that way. Imagine someone reading books about swimming for years without ever getting into the water. They may understand every technique, but the moment they jump into a pool, their body doesn't know what to do. English works in a very similar way. Your brain doesn't become fluent simply because it has more information. It becomes fluent by using that information repeatedly in real situations. This is why English should stop feeling like a school subject. In school, success is measured by correct answers, completed exercises, and passing exams. Real communication is different. Its purpose is not to be perfect, it is to connect with another person. When your goal changes from "I must not make mistakes" to "I want to express my ideas clearly," everything begins to change. You become more relaxed, your thoughts flow more naturally, and speaking starts to feel less like a test and more like a conversation. The moment you stop treating English as something you only study and start treating it as something you actually use, you cross an important line. Every sentence you speak, every opinion you share, and every small conversation becomes part of your learning process. Instead of waiting until you feel ready, you grow by using the English you already know. That is the day English stops being another subject in your notebook and starts becoming a real part of your everyday life. And that is where the journey toward true fluency really begins. Chapter 2. Why information never becomes communication on its own. Learning English gives you information, but information alone has never created a conversation. You can know hundreds of grammar rules, recognize thousands of vocabulary words, and understand every sentence in your textbook, yet still struggle to answer a simple question in real life. That doesn't mean you've failed. It simply means your knowledge hasn't been trained to become communication. Think about someone who watches cooking videos every day. They may know every ingredient, every recipe, and every technique. But until they step into the kitchen and start cooking, that knowledge remains theoretical. The same is true for English. Reading, listening, and studying build your understanding, but speaking requires your brain to use that understanding instantly. That ability only grows through active use, not passive learning. This is where many English learners become frustrated. They expect speaking to improve automatically as they collect more information, so they buy another course, memorize another vocabulary list, or spend more hours studying grammar. Their knowledge continues to grow, but their conversations don't improve at the same speed. The problem isn't a lack of effort. The problem is that they're strengthening only one part of the learning process. Communication is an active skill. It requires your brain to listen, understand, choose the right words, organize them into a sentence, and speak, all within a few seconds. At first, this process feels slow because your brain is trying to recall everything it has learned. With consistent speaking practice, however, those separate steps begin to connect. Instead of searching for every word, your brain starts recognizing complete phrases and common sentence patterns, making communication much faster and more natural. This is why real progress happens when information is used instead of simply stored. Every conversation, every sentence you speak aloud, and every moment you express your own ideas teaches your brain something that no grammar book can. You begin transforming knowledge into a practical skill that works in everyday situations. Over time, speaking becomes less about remembering lessons and more about sharing your thoughts naturally. The goal is not to collect English forever. The goal is to make English available the moment you need it. Once information becomes communication, you stop depending on memory alone. You begin trusting your ability to think, respond, and express yourself in English with increasing confidence. That is the bridge every fluent speaker eventually crosses, and it is one of the most important steps on the path to real fluency. Chapter 3: The silent habit that keeps fluent learners moving. Fluent learners do something every day that most people never notice. It is not a special course, a difficult grammar exercise, or a long vocabulary session. It is a quiet habit. They keep English active in small moments throughout the day. They do not wait for the perfect time to study. They use the language while walking, cooking, getting ready, or thinking about their plans. They may describe what they see, explain what they are doing, or form a few simple sentences about how they feel. These moments may seem too small to matter, but together they train the brain to reach English more quickly. Most learners use English only during study time. They open a book, watch a lesson, complete an exercise, and then return to their first language for the rest of the day. This creates long gaps in which English becomes inactive. When they try to speak again, their brain needs time to restart. Fluent learners reduce those gaps by keeping a small connection with English throughout the day. The power of this habit comes from consistency, not difficulty. You do not need to speak for an hour. Even 2 or 3 minutes of active English can strengthen the connection between your thoughts and your words. You might explain what you need to do next, summarize something you watched, or answer an imaginary question. The topic is not important. What matters is regularly turning your own thoughts into English. This kind of practice is different from repeating sentences from a textbook. You are not copying someone else's ideas. You are choosing your own message and finding a way to express it. That small effort teaches your brain to create language instead of only recognize it. At first, your sentences may be basic, but basic English used often is more valuable than advanced English that remains silent. Another reason this habit works is that it removes pressure. During a real conversation, you may worry about making mistakes or taking too long to answer. When you practice alone, you can slow down, restart a sentence, and try a different expression. This gives your brain a safe place to experiment. Gradually, the words become easier to access, and you feel less nervous when speaking with other people. You can begin with ordinary situations. While preparing breakfast, say what you are doing. I'm making tea. I need a clean cup. The water is almost ready. Before leaving home, describe your plan. First, I'll go to the store. Then I need to call my friend. At the end of the day, explain one thing that happened and how you felt about it. These sentences are simple, but they are connected to real life, which makes them easier to remember and use again. The habit should remain natural and manageable. Do not turn every moment into a lesson or force yourself to speak perfectly. Choose a few short moments and use the English you already know. When a word is missing, use a simpler one or explain the idea in another way. This builds flexibility, which is essential in real communication. Fluent learners keep moving because they do not allow English to disappear between lessons. They maintain a quiet daily relationship with the language. Each small sentence strengthens the path from thought to speech. Over time, that path becomes faster, clearer, and more reliable. The silent habit is simple. Keep English alive even when nobody is listening. That is how knowledge slowly becomes available, speaking becomes less forced, and progress continues long after the lesson has ended. Chapter 4: Why your mouth waits for your brain. Your mouth is not the real reason you hesitate when speaking English. The delay begins in your mind. Before you say even one sentence, your brain may be trying to complete several tasks at the same time. It searches for vocabulary, checks grammar, chooses the correct tense, arranges the words, worries about pronunciation, and asks whether the sentence sounds natural. While all of this is happening, Your mouth has nothing ready to say, it simply waits. This is why you may understand a question immediately, but still need several seconds to answer. You know what you want to communicate, yet your brain is trying to build the perfect sentence before allowing you to speak. That search for perfection creates silence, hesitation, and pressure. Suppose someone asks, "What did you do yesterday?" The answer is simple. You may want to say, "I visited my friend and we had dinner together." But instead of expressing the idea directly, your mind may begin checking everything. Should I use visited or have visited? Is had dinner correct? Should I say with my friend or together? Will my pronunciation sound strange? What if I make a mistake? By the time your brain finishes examining the sentence, the natural moment to respond has already passed. The person may still be waiting, but now you feel nervous because the pause has become noticeable. That nervousness makes the next sentence even harder. This does not happen because your English is too weak. It often happens because your brain has been trained to analyze English more than it has been trained to produce it. Traditional learning usually rewards careful thinking. In grammar exercises, you have time to read the question, compare different answers, remember the rule, and choose the correct option. During real conversation, however, nobody gives you 30 seconds to prepare every sentence. Communication moves quickly. You need to express a clear idea even when the sentence is not perfect. Your mouth waits because your brain believes that every sentence must be completed internally before it can be spoken. Fluent speakers do not always work this way. They often begin speaking with only the first part of the message ready. The rest of the sentence develops as they continue. For example, they may begin with, "Well, yesterday I..." That short beginning gives their brain a little more time to organize the next idea. Then they continue, "Mine Shinpine went to see a friend, and we had dinner together." They do not necessarily see the entire sentence in their mind before speaking. They build it while communicating. This is an important skill because real speaking is not the same as writing. In writing, you can plan, edit, delete, and rewrite. In conversation, your thoughts and words must move together. Many learners unknowingly use a three-step system. First, they create the idea in their native language. Second, they translate it into English. Third, they inspect the English sentence for mistakes. Only after completing these steps do they speak. This system may work for very short sentences, but it becomes too slow during a real conversation. Longer ideas create longer delays. By the time you translate one sentence, the conversation may already have moved to another subject. The solution is not to force yourself to speak extremely fast. Speed without control can make you more anxious. The goal is to reduce the number of mental decisions required before you begin. One way to do this is to use familiar sentence openings. Expressions such as, "I think," "Mixative is," "in my experience," "the main reason is," "for me," and "what I mean is," give your mouth a clear starting point. Once you begin speaking, your brain can prepare the next part while your mouth delivers the first part. These openings are useful because the beginning of a sentence is often the hardest part. You may have an idea, but not know how to enter it. A familiar phrase acts like a doorway. It allows you to move from silence into speech without constructing everything from zero. Consider the question, why are you learning English? Without a starting pattern, your mind may search for the perfect answer, but with a familiar opening, you can begin immediately. The main reason is that I want better opportunities. Or, for me, English is important because I want to communicate with more people. The sentence does not need to be advanced, it only needs to carry your meaning forward. Another reason your mouth waits is that you may be trying to use vocabulary that is beyond your active level. You recognize many impressive words while reading or listening, but you cannot retrieve them quickly during speaking. When you try to force these words into conversation, your brain slows down. A simpler word that arrives immediately is usually better than an advanced word that takes 10 seconds to remember. Fluent communication depends on availability, not complexity. The best word is often the one you can use naturally at the right moment. For example, you may want to say that a situation was overwhelming, but the word does not come quickly. Instead of becoming silent, you can say, "It was very difficult, and I felt stressed." The idea still reaches the listener. You have protected the flow of communication. This ability to explain an idea differently is one of the most valuable speaking skills. Real fluency does not mean always remembering the perfect word. It means knowing how to continue when the perfect word is missing. Your mouth also waits when you are afraid of hearing your own mistakes. Some learners know exactly what they want to say, but they stop themselves because the sentence does not feel completely safe. They would rather remain silent than risk using the wrong tense or pronunciation. But silence does not give your brain the experience it needs. Each time you speak, your brain receives feedback. It notices which sentence came easily, where you became stuck, and which expression you need to practice again. Mistakes are not interruptions in the learning process. They are part of the process that teaches your brain how to respond faster next time. You can begin reducing the delay with short response practice. Choose a simple question and give yourself only a few seconds to begin answering. You do not need to complete the whole answer immediately. Your first goal is simply to start. For example, what do you usually do in the morning? You might begin, usually I wake up early, then continue naturally. I make breakfast, check my messages, and prepare for the day. The important part is that you did not wait until the entire answer was perfect. You allowed speaking and thinking to happen together. You can also practice giving 3 versions of the same answer. Start with one sentence, then add one detail, and finally explain the idea more fully. Question: what kind of movies do you enjoy? First answer: I enjoy comedy movies. Second answer: I enjoy comedy movies because they help me relax. Third answer: I usually enjoy comedy movies because they help me relax after a long day, especially when I watch them with my family. This teaches your brain that it does not need to produce a long, polished answer immediately. It can begin simply and expand gradually. Pauses are also not your enemy. Native speakers pause, restart sentences, change words, and use expressions such as "let me think," "how can I explain this," or "what I'm trying to say is." These phrases keep the conversation alive while giving the brain extra time. A pause becomes a problem only when you treat it as a failure. When you remain calm, a short pause can sound thoughtful rather than weak. The connection between the brain and mouth becomes stronger through repetition. The first time you express an idea, the sentence may feel slow. The second time, it becomes easier. After using a similar pattern many times, your brain no longer needs to build it carefully. The structure becomes familiar, and your mouth can produce it with less effort. This is why repeating useful ideas is more effective than constantly studying new information. A sentence becomes part of your speaking ability only after you have used it enough times for it to feel available. Your goal is not to remove thinking from speaking. Thinking is always involved. The goal is to make the process lighter, faster, and less crowded. Instead of checking 10 things before opening your mouth, focus first on the message. Ask yourself, what is the main idea I want this person to understand? Then express that idea with the English you can access now. Do not wait for the perfect sentence. Begin with a clear one. Do not search endlessly for the most advanced word. Use the word that keeps you moving. Do not prepare an entire paragraph in your head. Start with the first idea and build from there. As this habit develops, your mouth will stop waiting for complete instructions from your brain. The two will begin working together. You will think while speaking, adjust while communicating, and trust yourself even when every sentence is not perfect. That is when conversation begins to feel less like solving a difficult problem and more like expressing a real thought. Chapter 5. Build an English environment inside your mind. You do not need to live in an English-speaking country to make English part of your daily life. You do not need foreign friends around you all day. And you do not need to surround yourself with difficult books, long lectures, or advanced conversations. The most powerful English environment is not always outside you. It can be built inside your own mind. An internal English environment means that English is no longer limited to lessons, notebooks, or practice sessions. It becomes one of the languages your mind regularly uses to notice, organize, and express everyday thoughts. Instead of opening English only when it is time to study, you create small opportunities for it to appear naturally throughout your day. Most learners have a very clear separation between English and normal life. They study English for 30 minutes or 1 hour, then mentally close the lesson and return completely to their first language. During that study period, English may feel active and familiar, but after several hours without using it, the connection becomes weaker again. The next time they try to speak, it feels as though their brain has to search for the language and turn it back on. This is one reason speaking often feels harder than understanding. You may recognize English when it comes from a video, a teacher, or a book, but your mind is not used to creating English from your own life. It receives the language from outside, yet rarely produces it from within. Building an English environment inside your mind changes that relationship. You stop waiting for English to come to you and begin inviting it into ordinary moments. Start by noticing the thoughts you already have every day. Your mind is constantly speaking, even when you are silent. It reminds you what you need to do, reacts to what happens, makes decisions, asks questions, remembers the past, and plans the future. These thoughts are already there. You are not creating extra work. You are simply choosing a few of them and giving them an English form. For example, while getting ready in the morning, your mind may naturally think, "I'm running late, I need to find my keys," or "I should leave in 10 minutes. These are perfect thoughts to express in English. They are short, useful, and connected to a real situation. Because they belong to your actual life, they carry more meaning than random textbook sentences. While walking outside, you can notice simple details. The road is busy today. That shop is still closed. Or the weather feels cooler than yesterday. While waiting for someone, you can think, "They may arrive soon. I hope we are not late," or "I should send a message." These small sentences teach your brain to connect English directly with experience. The purpose is not to translate every thought you have. That would quickly become exhausting and unnatural. You only need to choose short moments where English can enter easily. One thought while making breakfast, one observation while traveling, one decision while planning your day, and one reflection before sleeping can be enough to keep the language mentally active. At first, your English thoughts may sound very simple. That is not a weakness. Simple thoughts are the foundation of natural speaking. In real life, much of communication is built from common language. "I need this," "I don't agree," "That looks useful," "I'm not sure," "I'll do it later," or "This is taking longer than I expected." These phrases may not look impressive on paper, but they are the language of real daily thinking. Many learners make the mistake of trying to create advanced thoughts too soon. They want their internal English to sound like a speech, an essay, or a professional presentation. When they cannot produce that level of language quickly, they return to their first language and assume they are not ready. But an internal English environment grows gradually. You begin with small, clear ideas and allow them to become more detailed over time. Suppose you are thinking about your work or studies. A basic thought may be, "I have a lot to do today." Later, you can develop it. "I have several tasks to finish, so I need to organize my time carefully." With more practice, you may think, "If I complete the difficult work first, the rest of the day will feel easier." The thought becomes richer because your English is becoming more available, not because you forced yourself to use complicated words. You can also create mental categories in English. Think about the areas that appear most often in your life: family, work, food, travel, money, health, study, plans, problems, and emotions. Build a small group of useful phrases for each area. For work, you may use, "I need to finish this today. This task is more difficult than I expected." Me, "I should ask for more information." For plans, "I haven't decided yet. I may change my schedule. I'll think about it later." For emotions, "I feel a little nervous. That made me feel relieved. I'm disappointed, but I can try again." When these phrases become familiar, your mind begins using them with less effort. You are no longer inventing English from nothing. You are creating a personal system based on the situations you actually experience. Another powerful way to build an internal English environment is to ask yourself small questions. Questions guide the mind and create a natural reason to answer. In the morning, ask, "What is the most important thing I need to do today?" Before making a decision, ask, "What is the better option?" After watching something, ask, "What was the main idea?" At the end of the day, ask, "What went well today?" You do not need to give long answers. 1 or 2 sentences are enough. The value comes from forming the answer yourself. This trains your mind to move from a question directly into an English response. You can also mentally prepare for situations that may happen later. Before going to a shop, think about what you may need to ask. Before a meeting, consider how you will explain your idea. Before calling someone, form the first 2 sentences you want to say. This is not memorizing an entire conversation. It is giving your brain a small amount of useful preparation. For example, I'm calling to ask about. I wanted to check weather. Could you explain this part again? When the real situation begins, these expressions are already close to the surface. Your brain does not need to search as deeply, so speaking becomes easier. Your inner environment should also include reactions, not only descriptions. Real conversation is full of quick reactions. That makes sense. I didn't expect that. That sounds interesting. I'm not completely sure. I understand your point. That is exactly what I mean. Practice connecting these expressions to your real emotional responses. When something surprises you, think, I didn't expect that. When you agree with an idea, think, that makes sense. When you are uncertain, think, I need more time to decide. These reactions are extremely useful because they help you participate in conversations without needing to create a long sentence immediately. An internal English environment also changes the way you learn vocabulary. Instead of memorizing isolated words, you begin placing new language into your personal world. Suppose you learn the word delay. Do not only write the meaning, connect it to your life. The bus was delayed. There may be a delay. This delay is causing a problem. I had to change my plan because of the delay. Now the word is connected to actions, situations, and sentence patterns. It is more likely to appear when you need it because your mind has already used it in meaningful contexts. The same method works with phrases. If you learn run out of, connect it to familiar experiences. We ran out of milk. My phone is running out of battery. I'm running out of time. These examples are easier to remember because they are practical. You are not simply studying the phrase, you are giving it a place in your mental environment. One important part of this process is allowing incomplete English. Sometimes you know the main idea, but not every word needed to express it. Do not immediately abandon the thought. Use the English you have and leave a small gap if necessary. For example, you may want to think, this room feels too crowded, but you cannot remember crowded. You can think, there are too many people in this room. The message remains clear. This teaches your brain to stay in English even when one word is missing. That flexibility matters because real communication is rarely perfect. Even advanced speakers sometimes forget words. The difference is that they do not stop the entire message. They explain the idea another way. Building an English environment inside your mind gives you many chances to practice this skill privately. You should also create space for English feelings, not just English facts. Language becomes more natural when it is connected to emotion. Instead of only thinking, the meeting ended, add your reaction. I'm glad the meeting is over. Instead of, I made a mistake, think, I'm frustrated, but now I know what to improve. Instead of, I received good news, think, that made me really happy. Emotional language is important because conversations are not only about information. People speak to show excitement, disappointment, worry, hope, surprise, and gratitude. When your inner English includes these emotions, your spoken English becomes more personal and expressive. Another useful practice is to mentally retell small events. Choose one short experience and explain it to yourself in English. For example, I went to the market this afternoon. It was more crowded than usual. I wanted to buy a few things, but one item was not available. I decided to visit another shop tomorrow. This practice builds order in your thoughts. You learn how to begin, add details, and finish an idea. Over time, this helps you tell stories more clearly in real conversations. You can retell a phone call, a problem at work, something funny you saw, a decision you made, or a conversation you had. The event does not need to be important. Ordinary experiences are often the best material because they use practical language you will need again. You may also create short imaginary conversations. Ask yourself a question and answer it as though another person were speaking with you. What do you usually do on weekends? I normally spend time with my family, but sometimes I stay home and rest. Why do you prefer staying home? Because my week is usually busy and I need time to recover. This practice develops conversational movement. You are not only producing one prepared sentence, you are following an idea through several connected responses. However, your internal English environment should never become a place of constant self-correction. If every thought is interrupted by grammar analysis, English will begin to feel like school again. Let the thought continue first. Correct only what is necessary afterward. For example, you may think, yesterday I go to the shop. You already understand the meaning. After finishing the thought, you can calmly adjust it. Yesterday I went to the shop. Then repeat the correct version once and move on. Do not punish yourself or replay the mistake repeatedly. The purpose is growth, not self-judgment. It is also important to match your mental English to your current level. A beginner may use short descriptions and basic questions. An intermediate learner may explain reasons, compare choices, and summarize events. An advanced learner may explore opinions, arguments, and detailed reflections. Your internal environment should challenge you slightly without making every thought difficult. You can think of it as a room you are slowly furnishing. At first, the room may contain only a few useful expressions. Then you add more vocabulary, stronger sentence patterns, clearer reactions, and better ways to explain ideas. You do not build everything in one day. You improve the room piece by piece until it becomes comfortable and familiar. Consistency matters more than intensity. Spending one full day trying to think only in English may leave you tired and discouraged. Using English in several small moments every day is far more effective. The goal is not to replace your first language. The goal is to make English easier to access. You can create simple mental checkpoints. When you wake up, think about your first plan in English. When you begin a task, explain what you are about to do. When something unexpected happens, form one English reaction. When you finish the day, summarize one event. These checkpoints create regular contact without making English feel like a burden. Over time, something important begins to happen. English stops arriving only when you deliberately call for it. Certain phrases appear automatically. You see a situation and an English expression comes to mind. You hear a question and your response begins forming before you translate it. You notice that your mind is starting to recognize direct connections between meaning and English. This is the real value of an internal English environment. It reduces the distance between your experience and the language you want to speak. A cup becomes a cup without passing through another word first. A feeling becomes I'm worried without a long mental search. A plan becomes I need to leave early before you construct it piece by piece. This change may be slow at first, but it grows through repetition. Every small English thought strengthens the path. Every personal sentence makes the language more relevant. Every internal reaction makes English feel less foreign. You do not need to wait until your English is advanced to begin. In fact, building this environment is one of the ways your English becomes advanced. Start with the words you already know. Use them to describe your real life. Let simple thoughts become longer when they are ready. Allow English to appear in quiet moments without turning those moments into tests. The goal is not to perform English inside your mind. The goal is to make room for it. When English has a place in your daily thoughts, speaking becomes less like pulling words from a distant memory. The language is already active. The ideas are already connected to your life. Your mouth is no longer starting from nothing. That is how an English environment grows inside your mind. Not through pressure, but through presence. Not through perfect sentences, but through frequent, meaningful use. And once that environment becomes familiar, English begins to feel less like something outside you and more like a language you can genuinely use to understand, decide, react, and express who you are. Chapter 6. Stop collecting English, start living it. Many English learners are not really using the language. They are collecting it. They collect vocabulary lists, grammar notes, useful expressions, pronunciation tips, saved videos, downloaded courses, and pages of carefully written examples. Their notebooks become fuller, their playlists become longer, and their knowledge slowly grows. Yet when a real conversation begins, much of that English remains unavailable. The problem is not that learning new things is useless. New words, structures, and expressions are necessary. The problem begins when collecting becomes the main activity and using becomes something you keep postponing. You tell yourself, I'll speak when I know more. You learn more, but you still do not feel ready. Then you think, I need better grammar first. You study grammar, but speaking still feels uncomfortable. Later, you decide that you need more vocabulary, clearer pronunciation, or another complete course. Each new resource makes you feel productive for a short time, but it can also delay the moment when you must use English independently. This creates a dangerous cycle. You continue preparing to speak without actually developing the habit of speaking. You become skilled at learning English, but not equally skilled at living through English. Collecting English feels safe because the answers are usually outside you. A teacher explains the rule, a video gives you the sentences, a book provides the examples. An application checks whether your answer is correct. You can pause, repeat, review, and study without the pressure of creating your own message. Living English is different. You must decide what you want to say. You must choose words from your own memory. You must continue even when the perfect expression is missing. There may be no answer key, no preparation time, and no one telling you exactly which sentence to use. That uncertainty makes many learners uncomfortable, so they return to studying, where everything feels more controlled. But control is not fluency. Fluency develops when you learn to move forward without complete control. It grows when you express a thought with the words available to you, adjust when necessary, and remain part of the conversation even when your English is imperfect. To understand this difference, think about someone who buys exercise equipment, watches training videos, studies nutrition, and reads about fitness every day. That person may know a great deal about health, but if they never move their body, the knowledge will not create physical strength. English works in the same way. Lessons can guide you, vocabulary can support you, grammar can improve your accuracy. But only regular use builds the practical strength needed for real communication. You begin living English when the language becomes connected to something you genuinely need, enjoy, think about, or care about. Instead of learning the word decision only because it appears in a vocabulary lesson, you use it to talk about a decision you are actually facing. I need to make an important decision this week. I haven't made a final decision yet. This decision could affect my future. Now the word is no longer floating alone in your memory. It belongs to your life. It carries a situation, a purpose, and an emotional meaning. Because of that connection, it becomes easier to remember and more likely to appear when you speak. The same is true for grammar. A tense becomes useful when it helps you express time, not when it is only the correct answer in an exercise. You use the past tense because you want to explain what happened yesterday. You use the future because you are discussing your plans. You use the present perfect because you are connecting a past experience to your life now. Grammar stops feeling like a set of rules and begins functioning as a tool for meaning. Suppose you study the phrase, I've been meaning to. You could write it in a notebook and memorize its definition. But living English means attaching it to something true. I've been meaning to call my friend. I've been meaning to organize my room. I've been meaning to start exercising again. The phrase becomes memorable because it now belongs to your unfinished plans. It is no longer simply English you have seen. It is English you have used to describe yourself. This is the transition many learners miss. They believe exposure is enough. They think that seeing a word many times will automatically make it available during conversation. Repeated exposure helps recognition, but recognition is not the same as ownership. You may recognize a phrase instantly while watching a video and still be unable to produce it while speaking. That phrase is familiar, but it is not yet active. To make language active, you must use it for your own purposes. You need to change it, personalize it, combine it with other ideas, and bring it into several situations. A word becomes yours when you can use it without needing the original lesson around it. For example, imagine learning the expression, it depends on. At first, repeat the original example. It depends on the weather. Then connect it to different parts of your life. It depends on how much time I have. It depends on the price. It depends on what my family decides. It depends on whether I finish my work. Finally, use it in a full answer. Will you travel this year? It depends on my schedule. I want to travel, but I may be too busy during the next few months. Now, you are not simply repeating the expression. You are using it to manage a real response. That is the difference between storing English and living it. Living English also means allowing the language to enter activities that already matter to you. You do not always need to create a separate English learning activity. You can bring English into something you already do. If you enjoy cooking, follow a simple recipe in English and explain the steps aloud. If you enjoy sports, describe a match, compare two players, or share your opinion about a team. If you like technology, explain how an application works, or talk about a device you want to buy. If you enjoy films, summarize a scene, describe a character, or explain why you liked the ending. When English is connected to your existing interests, practice feels less artificial. You are no longer speaking only because you are supposed to improve. You are using the language to engage with something meaningful. This changes motivation. Studying may depend on discipline, but living English creates its own reasons to continue. You want to understand the next video. You want to explain your opinion more clearly. You want to tell someone what happened. You want to join a discussion or understand a story without assistance. The language begins serving your life instead of your life constantly serving the language. Another sign that you are collecting English is that you keep searching for the best method but rarely stay with one process long enough to benefit from it. One week you focus on grammar. The next week you switch to vocabulary. Then you begin shadowing. After that, you download a speaking application. Soon you find another video promising a faster system, so you abandon the previous routine. Each method may be useful, but constant switching prevents depth. You remain excited by beginnings, yet you rarely continue long enough for anything to become automatic. Living English requires fewer methods and more repeated use. It is better to choose a small set of practical activities and continue them consistently than to collect 20 techniques you only try once. For example, you could choose one short daily routine. Listen to a short piece of English. Choose 2 useful expressions. Use each expression in 3 personal sentences. Speak for 2 minutes about a related topic. Return to the same language later in the week. This routine may appear simple, but it creates several important connections. You hear the language, understand it, personalize it, speak it, and revisit it. The English travels through your mind more than once and in more than one form. That repeated contact makes it more usable. Many learners also collect words that do not match their present needs. They memorize advanced vocabulary because it looks impressive, even though they still struggle to express ordinary ideas quickly. They may know words such as extraordinary, inevitable, or controversial, but hesitate when trying to explain that they missed the bus, changed an appointment, lost an item, or felt disappointed. Fluency is built first from the language of your real life. Ask yourself what you regularly need to discuss. Do you talk about work, study, family, plans, travel, money, health, responsibilities, goals, or daily problems? These areas should shape your active vocabulary. A useful word is not simply a word that appears on an advanced list. It is a word that helps you express something you often need to say. For one learner, deadline may be essential. For another, appointment may be more useful. Someone who works with customers may need expressions for explaining problems and offering solutions. A university student may need language for discussing research, assignments, and opinions. A parent may need vocabulary connected to routines, education, health, and responsibilities. Your English should begin reflecting your actual world. When the language matches your life, it becomes easier to use because the situations repeat naturally. You do not need to invent a reason to say the sentence. Life provides the reason. Living English also requires changing the way you respond to mistakes. A collector often treats mistakes as evidence that more study is needed before speaking again. They say one incorrect sentence and think, "I'm not ready, I need to review this grammar." A user treats the same mistake differently. They think, "The message was understood. Now I know what I need to improve." One reaction creates withdrawal, the other creates progress. Consider a learner who says, "Yesterday I meet my friend." The sentence contains an error, but the meaning is clear. A collecting mindset focuses entirely on the mistake. The learner feels embarrassed and may become silent. A living mindset notices the correction. Yesterday I met my friend, then the learner continues. We went to a cafe and talked for an hour. The mistake becomes a small adjustment rather than the end of communication. This does not mean accuracy is unimportant. Accuracy matters because clearer language helps others understand you. But accuracy grows more effectively when correction supports communication instead of replacing it. You can speak first, notice the error, improve it, and use the corrected form again. That process teaches more than avoiding the sentence completely. Living English also means using the language when the result is not impressive. A 2-minute explanation may contain pauses. A short voice recording may sound less smooth than you expected. An online comment may take several minutes to write. A conversation may include moments when you cannot find a word. These experiences may not feel successful, but they are real contact with the language. They show you what works and where the connection is still weak. The learner who produces imperfect English is often building more usable ability than the learner who only studies perfect examples. Perfect examples teach you what correct English looks like. Imperfect use teaches you how to create English under real conditions. Both are valuable, but one cannot replace the other. Another important part of living English is building personal memories in the language. When you remember English only from lessons, the language may feel distant. You remember the teacher's example, the book's sentence, or the audio recording, but not something you personally experienced. Begin creating memories connected to your own English use. Remember the first time you explained an idea successfully. Remember a conversation in which someone understood you. Remember the first film scene you understood without subtitles. Remember a word that helped you solve a real problem. Remember a moment when you answered faster than usual. These experiences build evidence. They show your brain that English is not only something you are learning, it is something you have already used. That evidence strengthens confidence more deeply than motivational words. You begin trusting yourself because you can remember actual moments of communication. Living English also changes how you review. Traditional review often means looking at the same notes again. You reread vocabulary, repeat definitions, and examine examples. This can refresh your memory, but active review asks you to recreate the language, close the notebook, and explain the idea. Use the expression in a new situation. Answer a question without looking. Retell the lesson in your own words. Connect yesterday's vocabulary to today's experience. This reveals whether the language is truly available. Suppose you learned 5 phrases yesterday. Instead of rereading them, ask yourself, can I use each phrase in a sentence about my life? Can I include 2 of them in one short story? Can I answer a question with one of them? Can I explain the phrase using simpler English? Active review turns memory into performance. It forces the language to leave the page and enter your own thinking. You should also stop measuring progress only by completed material. Finishing a textbook chapter is visible. Watching 10 lessons is easy to count. Learning 50 new words feels measurable. But communication progress is often quieter. You begin answering with less delay. You explain an idea without translating every part. You recover more quickly after forgetting a word. You use a familiar phrase naturally. You understand the main point even when you miss a few details. You speak for 3 minutes instead of 1. These changes may not produce a certificate or a completed checklist, but they are signs that English is becoming functional. A learner can complete many resources without becoming comfortable in conversation. Another learner may use fewer materials but develop stronger speaking ability because every lesson becomes part of real practice. The question should not only be, how much did I study? Ask, what can I now do with what I studied? Can you describe something more clearly? Can you answer a common question more naturally? Can you tell a short story? Can you express disagreement politely? Can you explain a problem? Can you ask for clarification? Can you continue when a word is missing? These abilities show that English is entering your life. One of the simplest ways to live English is to give every lesson a real destination. Before learning something, decide where you will use it. If you are studying language for opinions, use it to discuss a topic you care about. If you are learning phrases for requests, create a realistic situation and make several requests aloud. If the lesson is about storytelling, tell a true story from your week. If you learn vocabulary connected to emotions, describe how you felt during a recent experience. A lesson should not end when the video finishes or the page closes. It should end after the language has been used for your own message. You can follow a simple rule. Never learn useful English only once. Hear it, say it, change it, personalize it, use it later. When language moves through these stages, it begins becoming part of your active system. For example, you hear, "I didn't realize that," repeat it clearly, then change the ending. "I didn't realize that the shop closed early. I didn't realize that the meeting had been cancelled. I didn't realize that this task would take so long." Later, use it while describing something real. "I didn't realize that my phone was almost out of battery, so I couldn't finish the call." The expression has now traveled from someone else's sentence into your own experience. You should also allow English to become part of small decisions. While choosing what to eat, think, "I want something light." While planning your time, "I should finish this before lunch." While deciding whether to go somewhere, "I'm tired, but I may feel better if I go." Decision-making language is powerful because it requires you to compare, explain reasons, and express preferences. These are central speaking skills. You can extend the thought, "I could stay home, but I've already cancelled twice." The first option is cheaper, although the second one looks more reliable. "I'd rather finish the work now so I can relax later." These are not classroom sentences. They are tools for organizing real choices. Living English also includes moments of enjoyment. The language should not always be attached to effort, correction, and improvement. Listen to a story because you are curious about the ending. Watch a conversation because the people are interesting. Read a simple article because you care about the subject. Follow a creator because their ideas help you. Laugh at a joke, react to a scene, or become emotionally involved in a story. When English gives you enjoyment, your brain builds a different relationship with it. The language no longer represents only work. It becomes connected to curiosity, entertainment, and discovery. This makes continued exposure easier because you are not constantly forcing yourself. Choose material that is understandable enough to enjoy, but challenging enough to teach you something. When every sentence is difficult, you become tired. When everything is too easy, you stop growing. Find content where you can follow the main idea and learn from the details. Do not pause every 5 seconds to collect every unknown word. That can destroy the experience and turn enjoyable content into another vocabulary exercise. Sometimes, let the message continue. Guess meaning from context. Notice repeated expressions. Allow yourself to understand the main point without controlling every detail. This is also part of real language use. During conversations, you will not always understand every word. You need the ability to stay connected to the meaning. Another difference between collecting and living is how you react when you forget something. Collectors often believe forgotten language was wasted effort. They become discouraged because a word they studied yesterday has disappeared today. But forgetting is not a final result. It is a signal that the memory needs another meaningful connection. Use the forgotten word again. Place it in a personal sentence. Connect it to an image or event. Return to it after several days. Each return strengthens the path. The goal is not to remember every word after one meeting. The goal is to meet useful language often enough that it gradually becomes available. A word you have seen 10 times but never used may remain passive. A word you used in 3 meaningful situations may become active much faster. Living English is built through meaningful repetition, not endless accumulation. You can also reduce collection by creating limits. Instead of learning 30 new expressions in one day, choose 5 that are truly useful. Spend more time using those 5 than searching for 25 more. Create questions with them. Build a short story. Use them in a voice recording. Try to include them in your thoughts later. Return to them tomorrow. Depth often produces better speaking than quantity. 5 expressions you can use are more valuable than 50 expressions you only recognize. The same principle applies to lessons. 1 lesson studied deeply can influence your speaking more than 5 lessons watched passively. After finishing a lesson, pause and ask, what is the one idea I want to remember? What are the 2 expressions I can use this week? What can I now explain that I could not explain before? Then do something with the answer immediately. Speak for 1 minute. Write a short message. Answer an imaginary question. Explain the idea to yourself. Immediate use tells your brain that the language matters. Living English also means making peace with repetition. Some learners constantly search for new material because repeating old language feels boring, but fluent speakers rely heavily on familiar structures. They do not invent language from nothing in every sentence. They use common patterns again and again. The reason is that I'm not sure whether it depends on what I'm trying to say is I used to, but now, even though I still. These structures become powerful because they can carry many different ideas. You can use the reason is that to discuss work, family, travel, learning, health, or any other topic. The structure stays the same while the message changes. Reusing it strengthens speed and flexibility. This is not limited or uncreative English. It is efficient communication. You also begin living English when you use it to learn something else. Study a simple subject through English instead of studying English itself. Learn about habits, history, business, psychology, technology, cooking, or personal development in understandable English. Now the language becomes the road, not the destination. Your attention moves toward the information, and English quietly supports the process. This is an important stage because fluent speakers are not always thinking about the language they are using. They are thinking about the subject, the person, the problem, or the story. When you learn something through English, you begin experiencing that same shift. You might watch a short explanation of how memory works and then summarize the main idea. You might read about a place you want to visit and explain what interested you. You might follow simple instructions and complete a task. English is no longer the object you are examining, it becomes the tool you are using. That is the direction real fluency moves toward. Your daily goal does not need to be large. Living English can begin with a few deliberate choices. Use English to plan one part of your day. Explain one real event aloud. Send one message in English. Learn one useful idea through English. Use 3 familiar expressions in new sentences. Record 1 minute of speech and listen back. Ask yourself one meaningful question and answer it fully. These actions are small, but they place English inside your actual life. The most important change is mental. Stop asking, how much English do I still need before I can use it? Begin asking, how can I use the English I already have today? The first question keeps fluency in the future. The second brings English into the present. You may not be able to explain everything perfectly, but you can express something. You may not know the best word, but you can use a simpler one. You may not speak for 20 minutes, but you can speak for 2. You may not understand an entire film, but you can understand one scene. You may not be ready for every conversation, but you can prepare for one common situation. Progress begins when you stop waiting for complete readiness and begin using partial ability. Your current English is not only an unfinished version of your future English, it is already a tool. It may be limited, but it can still help you describe, ask, answer, connect, and learn. Use it at its present level. As you use it, the level will grow. The more English becomes connected to your experiences, the less it feels like a collection of separate lessons. Words connect to memories, phrases connect to situations, grammar connects to meaning, listening connects to response, speaking connects to real intention. The language begins forming one living system. That is when studying becomes more effective too. You notice exactly what you need because real use reveals the gaps. Perhaps you discover that you need better language for giving reasons. Maybe you struggle to tell stories in order. Maybe you need more expressions for agreeing and disagreeing. Maybe you can describe objects but not emotions. These are useful discoveries because they guide your next lesson. Instead of studying randomly, you learn what your life and communication actually require. This creates a healthier cycle. Use English, notice a need, learn something relevant, use it again, improve through feedback, continue. In this cycle, studying and speaking support each other. Learning gives you tools, and living gives those tools a purpose. You do not need to reject grammar, vocabulary, lessons, or courses. You only need to stop treating them as finished achievements. A completed lesson is not the final goal. A memorized word is not the final goal. A correct exercise is not the final goal. The final goal is to communicate, to understand, respond, explain, connect, and express yourself. Everything you study should eventually move in that direction. So stop judging your English only by what you have collected. Look at what you can use. Look at the ideas you can now explain. Look at the situations you can manage. Look at the conversations you can enter. Look at the moments when English appears without being forced. That is where your real progress lives. You stop collecting English when you no longer need every sentence to come from a lesson. You begin creating your own sentences for your own life. You stop collecting English when vocabulary is not simply stored in a notebook. It begins appearing in your decisions, stories, reactions, and relationships. You stop collecting English when practice is no longer something you do only at a desk. It becomes part of how you watch, think, plan, listen, and communicate. And you start living English when the language becomes useful before it becomes perfect. That is the missing movement between studying and speaking. You do not wait until English is complete and then begin using it. You use it while it is still growing. Each real sentence gives the language more life. Each personal connection makes it easier to remember. Each imperfect attempt makes the next attempt stronger. The goal is not to own the largest collection of English knowledge. The goal is to build a language that moves with you into your day, your thoughts, your interests, your problems, your plans, and your conversations. English becomes fluent not when you have collected enough of it, but when the English you already know begins living through you. Chapter 7. The tiny decisions that create fluent speakers. Fluent speakers are not created by one perfect lesson, one powerful method, or one sudden breakthrough. They are created through hundreds of small decisions that seem unimportant in the moment. A learner decides to answer in English instead of remaining silent. They choose a simple word instead of waiting for an advanced one. They continue speaking after making a mistake. They repeat a useful expression instead of immediately searching for something new. They spend 5 minutes using English instead of telling themselves they need an entire free hour. Each decision is small. None of them feels dramatic. But repeated every day, they slowly change the way the brain responds to English. This is important because many learners believe fluency comes from large efforts. They think they need a perfect schedule, expensive course, long study session, or complete learning system before meaningful progress can begin. When they cannot create those conditions, they do nothing. They wait for Monday. They wait for more motivation. They wait until work becomes less busy. They wait until they feel confident. They wait until their vocabulary improves. But fluent speakers are often separated from stuck learners by what they do during imperfect days. They may not have much time, energy, or confidence, but they still make one useful decision that keeps the language moving. Suppose you have only 10 free minutes. One choice is to scroll through random content and promise yourself that you will practice tomorrow. Another choice is to speak for 2 minutes about your day, listen to a short English clip, and repeat one useful sentence. The difference seems small. Yet one choice keeps English inactive, while the other strengthens the connection between knowledge and use. Fluency grows through these repeated moments of contact. The most important decisions are often made before speaking begins. You may hear a question and immediately think, "My answer will not sound good." At that moment, you have a choice. You can remain silent because the sentence is not perfect, or you can begin with the English you have. You might say, "I'm not sure how to explain it, but..." That simple opening gives you a way into the conversation. Your answer may not be beautiful, but you have trained yourself to respond instead of withdraw. Every time you choose participation over silence, you strengthen an important speaking habit. Your brain learns that English is something you use under real conditions, not something you save for moments when you feel completely prepared. Another small decision involves vocabulary. Many learners stop speaking when they cannot remember one specific word. Their entire message becomes dependent on that missing word. They search their memory, become frustrated, and lose the flow of the conversation. Fluent speakers often make a different choice. They explain the idea another way. Perhaps you forget the word receipt. Instead of stopping, you say, "the paper they give you after you pay." Perhaps you forget appointment. You say, "the time I arranged to meet the doctor." Perhaps you cannot remember exhausted. You say, "I was extremely tired and had no energy." These explanations may not be elegant, but they keep communication alive. More importantly, they teach your brain to become flexible. Fluency is not the ability to remember every word instantly. It is the ability to continue when the perfect word is unavailable. That ability is built through a small decision. Explain instead of stop. Another decision appears when you make a mistake. You say, "She go to work every day." You notice the error. Now you can react in two ways. You can feel embarrassed, lose confidence, and become quiet. Or you can correct yourself calmly. "She goes to work every day." Then continue with your message. This second choice teaches your brain that mistakes can be repaired without destroying the conversation. It also changes your emotional relationship with speaking. Errors become manageable events rather than proof that you are not ready. Many learners think confidence must come before speaking. In reality, confidence is often the result of repeatedly making small decisions to continue despite discomfort. Each time you recover from a mistake, answer without perfect preparation, or express an idea with limited vocabulary, you collect evidence that you can communicate. That evidence matters more than positive thinking alone. You begin to trust yourself because you have seen yourself continue. One of the most powerful tiny decisions is choosing usefulness over difficulty. Learners sometimes believe that harder English is always better English. They select advanced articles, long lectures, complicated vocabulary, and difficult grammar because they want to improve quickly. But material that is far above your level often creates passive learning. You spend so much energy trying to understand that very little attention remains for active use. A fluent learner may choose something simpler, but use it deeply. They listen to a short conversation they mostly understand. They notice 3 useful expressions. They repeat those expressions clearly. They create personal examples. They use the language again later. The material may appear easy, but the learning is active. This decision to choose content you can use instead of content that only looks impressive can completely change your progress. The same principle applies to vocabulary. Learning 20 advanced words may feel productive, but if none of them appears in your daily life, they may quickly disappear. Learning 5 practical expressions and using them several times can have a much greater effect on speaking. For example, "I'm not used to it." That depends on the situation. "I haven't decided yet." The main problem is, "I didn't expect that." These phrases can enter many conversations. When you choose useful language, you increase the chance that it will become active. Fluent speakers repeatedly make decisions that reduce the distance between learning and use. They do not only ask, "What does this phrase mean?" They also ask, "Where could I use it?" They do not simply copy an example. They change it to match their own experience. They do not finish a lesson and immediately move to the next one. They stop and produce something with what they learned. These are small choices, but they prevent English from remaining passive. Consider the phrase, "I ended up." You may hear it in a lesson and understand that it describes a final, often unexpected result. A passive learner writes it down and continues watching. An active learner pauses and creates personal examples. "I planned to stay home, but I ended up going out." "I wanted to buy one thing, but I ended up buying 3. We got lost and ended up arriving late." The second learner has made a tiny decision to use the phrase immediately. That decision increases the chance that the expression will become available in real conversation. Another important decision is whether to protect your speaking time. Many people say they want to improve, but they allow every small distraction to take control of their day. Speaking practice is delayed because it feels less urgent than messages, videos, chores, and other responsibilities. You do not need a long session, but you do need a moment that belongs to English. It might be 5 minutes after breakfast. It could be during a walk. It may happen before you sleep. The exact time is less important than the decision to protect it. When a practice period is extremely small, it becomes difficult to excuse. You may not have time for an hour, but you probably have time to answer one question aloud. You may not be able to complete a full lesson, but you can summarize one idea. You may not have the energy to study grammar, but you can describe what happened during your day. The decision to do something small prevents an imperfect day from becoming a completely lost day. This creates continuity, and continuity is one of the strongest forces in language learning. When English disappears for several days, restarting feels difficult. Your mind needs time to recover familiar words and patterns, but when you maintain brief contact, the language stays closer to the surface. A fluent speaker is not necessarily someone who studies for hours every day. It is often someone who refuses to let English remain inactive for too long. Another small decision involves repetition. Many learners become bored with language they already understand. They constantly search for new videos, words, techniques, and lessons. New material feels exciting, but fluency depends heavily on becoming comfortable with familiar language. The first time you hear an expression, you may only understand it. The second time, you begin noticing its structure. The third time, you may repeat it more naturally. After using it several times, it begins appearing without conscious effort. If you abandon every phrase after one meeting, it may never reach that final stage. The decision to stay with useful language long enough for it to become automatic is not exciting, but it is powerful. You can repeat without making practice boring. Change the context. Use the same structure to express several different ideas. Take the pattern. I used to, but now. You can say, I used to study late at night, but now I study in the morning. I used to translate every sentence, but now I focus on the meaning. I used to avoid conversations, but now I try to participate. I used to feel nervous about mistakes, but now I correct them and continue. The pattern stays familiar while the message changes. This gives you both repetition and variety. Another decision that affects fluency is how quickly you return after missing practice. Everyone misses days, schedules change, responsibilities grow, and motivation falls. The problem is not missing one day. The problem is turning one missed day into a complete break. A learner may say, I missed yesterday, so my routine is ruined. I'll start again next week. That thought creates unnecessary delay. A stronger decision is, I missed yesterday, but I can do 5 minutes today. Fluent learners are not always perfectly consistent. They are simply good at returning. They do not waste several days feeling guilty about one missed session. They restart with the smallest useful action. This ability to return protects long-term progress. Your choices during conversations also matter. When another person speaks quickly, you may pretend to understand because asking for clarification feels embarrassing. But pretending removes an opportunity to learn and may create more confusion. A fluent communicator makes a different decision. They ask for help clearly. Could you say that again? Could you speak a little more slowly? What does that word mean? Do you mean that? These sentences are not signs of weak English. They are communication skills. The choice to ask instead of pretend helps you remain active in the conversation. It also shows that understanding is more important than protecting your image. Another useful decision is to respond with more than one word. A learner may understand a question but answer yes, no, maybe, I agree. These answers are correct, but they do not give the brain much speaking practice. A small improvement is adding one reason or detail. Yes, because I've experienced something similar. No, I don't think that would work in my situation. Maybe, but I need more information before deciding. I agree, especially when the problem affects everyone. This decision turns ordinary conversation into fluency training. You are not creating a separate lesson. You are simply making your real response slightly fuller. Over time, your brain becomes better at connecting ideas because you repeatedly move beyond the shortest possible answer. Another tiny decision is to notice language while listening. Many people listen only for general meaning. That is useful, but sometimes you should decide to pay attention to how the speaker expresses the idea. You may notice how they begin an opinion, the way I see it, how they disagree politely. I understand your point, but how they correct themselves. Actually, let me say that differently. How they buy time. That's an interesting question. You do not need to collect everything. Choose one expression that feels useful. Repeat it and use it in your own sentence. This small act transforms listening from entertainment into practical language development. Fluent learners also make careful decisions about correction. Correcting every mistake during speaking can destroy flow. Ignoring every mistake can slow improvement. The goal is balance. During a speaking activity, decide that communication comes first. Finish your idea before analyzing it. Afterward, Identify one or two errors that matter most. Perhaps you repeatedly use the wrong past tense. Maybe one word is difficult to pronounce. Perhaps your sentences become confusing because you join too many ideas together. Choose one issue and improve it. Trying to fix everything at once creates overload. Correcting one important pattern gives the brain a clear target. Small, focused improvement repeated over time produces stronger results than constant self-criticism. Another decision is whether to compare yourself with others. You may hear someone speaking smoothly and immediately think, their English is much better than mine. This comparison can either discourage you or teach you. Instead of asking, why am I not like them? Ask, what are they doing that I can learn from? Perhaps they use simple sentence patterns very confidently. Maybe they pause calmly instead of rushing. Perhaps they use linking phrases that make their ideas easier to follow. Maybe their vocabulary is not advanced, but it is highly available. The decision to observe instead of judge turns comparison into useful information. Every learner has a different history. Some have studied longer, had more speaking opportunities, or used English regularly at work or school. Comparing final results without comparing experience is unfair. Focus on the next skill you can improve. Another important decision is to speak about familiar subjects before constantly forcing yourself into unfamiliar ones. When the topic is familiar, you already have ideas. Your mental energy can focus on language rather than creating content and language at the same time. You can discuss your work, family, hometown, routine, goals, favorite films, recent experiences, or personal opinions. As these subjects become easier, you can expand into more complex areas. This creates a strong base. You learn how to explain reasons, tell stories, compare choices, and express feelings using topics you understand well. A learner who can speak clearly about 10 familiar topics has a practical foundation. A learner who studies vocabulary from 50 random topics may know more words but still struggle to maintain a conversation. Choosing depth before width is another small decision that creates fluency. You can build a personal topic bank. Choose common subjects that appear in real conversations, your daily routine, your work or studies, your family, your future plans. A recent problem, a difficult decision, a memorable experience, something you enjoy, something you want to improve. An opinion about a common issue. Practice each topic several times, but do not memorize a fixed speech. Express the same general ideas in different ways. One day, speak for 1 minute. Another day, answer specific questions. Later, explain the topic as though speaking to a friend. This repeated familiarity makes your English more dependable. Fluent speakers also decide not to abandon a sentence too quickly. Sometimes you begin speaking and realize the sentence is becoming complicated. You may stop halfway, apologize, and give up. A better choice is to repair it. Use phrases such as, let me say that more clearly. What I mean is, let me start again. The main point is, these expressions allow you to reorganize your message without leaving the conversation. Repair is a natural part of speaking. Even native speakers change direction, restart ideas, and correct themselves. The ability to repair a sentence is more useful than trying to guarantee that every sentence will be perfect from the beginning. Another small decision involves silence. A pause is not always a problem. Sometimes you need a moment to organize your thoughts. Learners often panic during a pause and fill it with nervous sounds or abandon the answer. Instead, choose to remain calm. You can say, let me think for a second. That's a good question. I haven't thought about that before. These phrases make the pause feel intentional. They give you time while keeping the listener connected. When you stop treating every pause as failure, your speaking becomes more controlled. You also make a choice every time you feel nervous. Nervousness may tell you to avoid the conversation. It may encourage you to wait until you feel more confident. But confidence rarely arrives before action. You do not need to remove nervousness completely. You can decide to speak while feeling nervous. Start with one sentence, ask one question, give one opinion. Stay in the conversation for 1 minute longer than usual. This is how your comfort zone grows, not through one fearless performance, but through small moments where you act despite discomfort. Another powerful decision is to use English for a real outcome. You can practice by ordering something, asking for information, writing a comment, joining a discussion, explaining a problem, or helping someone understand an idea. Real purpose changes attention. You stop thinking only about grammar because something else matters. You need an answer, a solution, a connection, or a result. This gives language emotional and practical meaning. Even a small outcome can be valuable. You ask a question and receive a helpful answer. You write a message and someone responds. You explain an idea and the listener understands. These moments show your brain that English works. That realization strengthens motivation because the language is no longer only an academic goal. It becomes useful. Your daily decisions also shape your identity. When you repeatedly tell yourself, "I am not ready to speak," you build the identity of someone who is always preparing. When you say, "I am learning to communicate with the English I have," you build a different identity. Your actions then support that identity. You speak briefly, you ask questions, you correct yourself, you return after mistakes, you use simple language with purpose. Gradually, you stop seeing yourself only as an English student. You begin seeing yourself as an English user who is still improving. That difference is powerful. A student may believe they need permission, preparation, or a lesson before using the language. A user understands that English can already be part of their life. Identity does not change through one statement. It changes through repeated evidence. Each small decision becomes a vote for the kind of speaker you are becoming. You choose to continue, you choose to simplify, you choose to practice, you choose to return, you choose to communicate. Over time, those choices create a pattern. The pattern creates skill, the skill creates confidence. And confidence makes the next decision easier. You can make this process practical by creating a few personal rules. Rule 1. When I learn a useful phrase, I will create 3 personal examples. Rule 2. When I forget a word, I will explain the meaning another way. Rule 3. When I make a mistake, I will correct it calmly and continue. Rule 4. When I have little time, I will do a small practice instead of nothing. Rule 5. When someone asks a question, I will add one reason or detail to my answer. Rule 6. When I miss a day, I will restart the next day without guilt. These rules remove unnecessary decisions. You no longer need to debate what to do every time. The response becomes part of your system. This matters because willpower changes from day to day. A clear rule supports you when motivation is low. You can also review your decisions at the end of the day. Do not only ask, "How much English did I study?" Ask, "Did I use English when I had the opportunity? Did I continue after making a mistake? Did I choose useful language? Did I explain an idea instead of stopping? Did I keep English active, even briefly?" These questions focus on behavior rather than perfection. A day can be successful even without a long lesson. Perhaps you used one new phrase naturally. Maybe you answered a question without translating. Perhaps you spoke despite feeling nervous. That is meaningful progress. Fluency is not built only during obvious practice sessions. It is also built in the moment you decide not to avoid, delay, or overthink. It grows when you choose the sentence you can say now, instead of waiting for the sentence you wish you could say. It grows when you use a familiar phrase one more time. It grows when you listen carefully to one expression. It grows when you ask for clarification. It grows when you give a longer answer. It grows when you return after a difficult day. These actions may feel too small to change anything, but fluency itself is made from small parts. A smooth conversation is made of many familiar words, structures, reactions, repairs, and decisions happening quickly. Those abilities become quick because they were practiced slowly and repeatedly. You do not wake up one morning with a completely different brain. You build the change through choices. At first, the choice to speak may require courage. Later, it requires less thought. Eventually, it becomes your normal response. That is how automatic speaking develops. A conscious decision is repeated until it becomes a habit. The habit is strengthened until it becomes a skill. The skill is used often enough that it begins to feel natural. The same process can work against you. If you repeatedly choose silence, your brain becomes skilled at avoiding speaking. If you always wait for perfect grammar, your brain becomes skilled at delaying. If you constantly switch methods, your brain becomes skilled at starting but not continuing. If you depend on translation every time, your brain strengthens that route. Every repeated choice teaches your brain something. That is why small decisions matter so much. They are not only responses to the present moment, they are training for future moments. When you decide to explain a missing word today, you are preparing yourself to recover during a real conversation tomorrow. When you give a fuller answer today, you are training yourself to develop ideas more naturally later. When you calmly correct a mistake today, you are building emotional control for future speaking situations. When you use 5 minutes well today, you are protecting the habit that will support months of progress. You do not need to make every decision perfectly. Some days you will avoid speaking. Sometimes you will become frustrated by mistakes. You may forget your routine or return to old habits. Progress does not require perfection. It requires awareness and return. Notice the choice. Choose differently when you can. Repeat the better choice often enough for it to become easier. The most effective decision is often the next small one, not the complete plan for the next year. Not the perfect method, not the promise that you will study for 3 hours tomorrow. The next decision may be, I will answer this question aloud. I will use this phrase in my own sentence. I will speak for 2 minutes. I will ask for clarification. I will continue even though the sentence is imperfect. That is enough to move forward. Fluent speakers are not people who always know exactly what to say. They are people who have learned what to do when they do not know. They simplify, they explain, they pause, they restart, they ask, they listen, they continue. Each of these is a decision. Together, these decisions create resilience. You stop depending on perfect conditions because you know how to handle difficulty. You can communicate even when a word is missing, the topic is unexpected, or the sentence does not come out as planned. That is a deeper form of fluency. It is not only smooth speech. It is the ability to remain active, flexible, and connected during real communication. So do not underestimate the next small choice you make with English. Choosing to speak one sentence may seem minor. Choosing to repeat one expression may feel ordinary. Choosing to practice for 5 minutes may appear insufficient, but these choices are shaping the path your brain will follow. Every useful decision strengthens the movement from thought to language. Every moment of active English makes the next moment slightly easier. Every time you refuse to wait for perfection, you become more capable of real communication. Fluency is not hidden inside one enormous breakthrough. It is hidden inside the decisions you make when nobody is watching, when motivation is low, when time is limited, and when your English feels imperfect. Those decisions determine whether English remains something you study or becomes something you can truly speak. Choose the small action. Choose the useful sentence. Choose to stay in the conversation. Choose to return tomorrow. That is how fluent speakers are created, not all at once, but one tiny decision at a time. Chapter 8. Turn every ordinary moment into speaking practice. You do not need a classroom, a speaking partner, or a perfectly planned study session every time you want to improve your English. Some of the most useful speaking practice can happen during ordinary moments that are already part of your day. Your morning routine, your walk to work, your time in the kitchen, your shopping trip, your short break, and even the quiet minutes before sleep can all become opportunities to strengthen your speaking. The important change is not adding more hours to your schedule. It is learning to use moments that would normally pass without any English at all. Many learners believe speaking practice must be formal. They imagine sitting at a desk, choosing a topic, setting a timer, and delivering a complete speech. That kind of practice can be helpful, but it is not the only way to improve. In real life, speaking is usually built from short reactions, simple explanations, quick questions, personal opinions, and small stories. Ordinary moments give you the perfect material for practicing exactly those skills. Start with the first few minutes of your day. When you wake up, do not try to create a long or complicated speech. Simply say what is happening and what you need to do next. I need to get ready. I didn't sleep very well. I have an important task today. I should leave earlier than usual. These sentences may look basic, but they train your brain to connect English with a real situation immediately. You are not repeating random examples from a book. You are using English to describe your own life as it happens. You can continue while getting dressed or preparing breakfast. This shirt is more comfortable. I think I'll make tea instead of coffee. There isn't much bread left. I need something quick because I'm running late. This kind of practice teaches you to speak without preparing a topic first. The situation gives you the topic, and your job is simply to respond to it in English. That is extremely valuable because real conversations work in the same way. You do not always know what someone will ask. You see, hear, or experience something, and you must form a response. When you regularly describe ordinary moments, you train yourself to produce English from the present situation instead of waiting for a memorized answer. Traveling is another useful opportunity. Whether you are walking, driving, sitting on a bus, or waiting for a train, you can describe what you notice around you. The traffic is moving slowly. That building looks new. There are fewer people than usual. The bus should arrive soon. I may be late if this continues. You can also go beyond description and add a reason, comparison, or prediction. The road is busier because it is Monday morning. This area looks quieter than it did last week. I think it may rain later. If the traffic gets worse, I'll take another route. Now you are not only naming what you see, you are connecting ideas, which is an important part of fluent speaking. Ordinary speaking practice becomes stronger when you move through 3 simple levels. First, describe the situation. Second, add your reaction. Third, explain the reason. For example, the shop is closed. I'm surprised because it is usually open. Maybe they changed their working hours. Or, the room is very warm. I feel uncomfortable. I should open a window or turn on the fan. This pattern helps you develop longer answers naturally. Instead of forcing yourself to speak for several minutes, you build the message one layer at a time. Household tasks are also excellent for practice because they contain clear actions, objects, and decisions. While cleaning, you can say, I need to organize this shelf. These papers should go in the drawer. I haven't used this item for months. I'll keep this, but I can throw that away. While cooking, I'm cutting the vegetables. The water is beginning to boil. I added too much salt. I should lower the heat. The food needs a few more minutes. You can explain not only what you are doing, but why you are doing it. I'm preparing the ingredients first because it will save time later. I'm using a smaller pan because I'm only cooking for myself. I'm adding this slowly so the mixture does not become too thick. These explanations train you to organize steps and give reasons. That skill is useful in conversations, presentations, instructions, and storytelling. Shopping gives you another natural practice environment. Before leaving home, describe what you need. I need to buy milk, rice, and some fruit. I should check the price before choosing. I don't want to spend too much today. At the shop, you can silently or quietly compare products. This one is cheaper, but the quality may be lower. The larger package is better value. I've never tried this brand before. This looks useful, but I probably don't need it. After returning home, summarize what happened. I found everything except the bread. The shop was crowded, so it took longer than expected. I bought a different product because my usual one was unavailable. These moments teach practical vocabulary, but more importantly, they train decision-making language. You learn to compare, choose, reject, explain, and change plans. You can also turn waiting time into speaking practice. Waiting often feels useless. You may be standing in a queue, waiting for a friend, sitting before an appointment, or waiting for a file to download. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone, use 1 or 2 minutes to form English thoughts. Ask yourself, what am I waiting for? How long have I been here? What will I do afterward? How do I feel right now? You might answer, I've been waiting for about 10 minutes. I'm getting a little impatient. After this, I need to go home and finish some work. I hope it doesn't take much longer. This kind of spontaneous speaking develops your ability to respond to simple questions without preparation. Work and study activities provide even more opportunities. Before starting a task, explain your goal. I need to finish this report before lunch. The first part should be easy, but the final section may take longer. I'm not sure where to begin, so I'll make a short plan. During the task, describe a problem. This information is incomplete. I need to check another source. I made a mistake, so I have to do this part again. Afterward, review the result. I finished most of the work. The task was easier than I expected. I still need to make a few changes. These statements help you practice language for planning, problem solving, progress, and reflection. Those are common subjects in professional and academic conversations. You can also rehearse real conversations before they happen. Suppose you need to ask a teacher, manager, colleague, or customer a question. Instead of memorizing a complete speech, prepare only the opening and the main point. I wanted to ask about. I'm having difficulty with. Could you explain what you mean by? I need some help understanding. Then imagine one or two possible responses and decide how you might continue. This kind of preparation reduces pressure because you are not entering the conversation with an empty mind. You have already activated the language you may need. However, do not prepare every word. Real conversations are unpredictable. Your goal is to create a starting point, not a script that collapses when the other person says something unexpected. Your phone can also become a speaking tool rather than only a source of distraction. Record a short voice note about something that just happened. It can be 30 seconds or 1 minute. You might say, I just finished a difficult task. It took longer than I planned because I had to correct several mistakes. I'm tired, but I'm glad it is complete. Listen once, but do not judge every error. Focus on one question. Was your message clear? Then record it again with one improvement. Perhaps you add a better transition, use a clearer verb, or remove an unnecessary pause. This simple activity turns a real moment into useful speaking practice without requiring a separate lesson. You can also use photographs as speaking prompts. Choose a picture from your phone and describe the memory connected to it. Where were you? Who was there? What happened before the picture? Why do you remember that day? How did you feel? For example, this photo was taken during a family trip last year. We had planned to arrive early, but the journey took longer than expected. The weather was beautiful, and everyone was in a good mood. I remember this moment because it was the first time we had all traveled together in several years. A personal photograph makes speaking easier because the ideas already exist in your memory. You do not need to invent content. You only need to organize it in English. Meals can also create practice. Before eating, describe what you prepared or ordered. During the meal, comment on the taste, texture, or quality. This is spicier than I expected. The vegetables are cooked well. I like the sauce, but the rice is a little dry. Afterward, explain whether you would choose it again. I would order it again, but next time I would ask for less spice. This may seem like a small activity, but it teaches descriptive language and personal preference, both of which appear frequently in conversation. Another powerful ordinary moment is making a decision. Every day you decide what to wear, what to eat, when to leave, what to buy, which task to do first, or whether to accept an invitation. These decisions can become natural English practice. Instead of only thinking yes or no, explain your reasoning. I could go today, but I have too much work. The blue one looks better, although the black one is more practical. I should finish the difficult task first because I'll have more energy now. I want to buy it, but I don't really need it. When you explain decisions, you practice comparison, contrast, cause, possibility, and preference. These are not isolated grammar topics. They are tools for expressing real thought. Problems are also valuable speaking material. When something goes wrong, your first reaction may happen in your native language. Try adding one simple English response. My internet has stopped working. I saved the wrong file. I forgot to bring the document. This is not what I expected. Then move toward a solution. I'll restart the computer. I need to call someone. I may have to change my plan. I should check whether there is another option. This trains practical communication. In real conversations, you often need to explain what happened, why it matters, and what you plan to do next. Do not avoid negative experiences because you believe practice should always be positive. Frustration, disappointment, confusion, and inconvenience are part of life. Learning how to express them makes your English more complete. You can say, I'm frustrated because this keeps happening. I'm disappointed with the result. I don't understand why this is not working. I need a moment to think. These expressions help you communicate emotion without becoming silent or overwhelmed. Entertainment can also become active practice. After watching a short video, do not immediately move to the next one. Pause and give a brief reaction. What was the main idea? Do I agree with it? What surprised me? What would I add? You might say, the speaker's main point was that habits are more important than motivation. I agree because motivation changes from day to day, but a habit can continue even when you feel tired. That short response transforms passive watching into active language use. After a film or television scene, describe one character's decision. I think the character made the wrong choice because he acted too quickly, or predict what may happen next. She will probably discover the truth in the next scene. Prediction and opinion make listening more connected to speaking. Reading can be used in a similar way. After reading one paragraph, look away and explain the idea in simpler English. Do not repeat the original words. Say what you understood. This teaches you to process meaning and recreate it, which is closer to real communication than copying sentences. You can begin with, the paragraph is mainly about, the writer is saying that. The important point is, my understanding is. Then add your reaction. I agree because, I'm not completely convinced because. This reminds me of, now reading becomes a source of ideas for speaking rather than a separate activity. Social media can also provide short prompts, but you must use it carefully. Instead of scrolling without thinking, choose one post, picture, or short video and explain your reaction aloud. I think this advice is useful, but it may not work for everyone. This picture looks peaceful because the person is probably trying to show. You do not need to spend long. One thoughtful response is more useful than 20 minutes of passive scrolling. Another ordinary moment appears when you remember something from the past. A smell, song, place, or object may remind you of an experience. Use that memory as a speaking prompt. This song reminds me of my school years. I used to listen to it while traveling. It makes me feel nostalgic because life was very different then. Memories naturally encourage past tense, description, emotion, and storytelling. They can help you practice several language skills without making the activity feel mechanical. You can also speak about the future during ordinary planning. Before the weekend, explain what you hope to do. On Saturday, I want to finish some work in the morning. If the weather is good, I may go out in the evening. I also need to visit a relative, but I haven't decided what time. Before a busy day, tomorrow will be difficult because I have several appointments. I need to organize everything carefully so I don't waste time. Future planning gives you practice with intentions, possibilities, conditions, and uncertainty. The end of the day is one of the best moments for short speaking practice. You do not need to describe everything that happened. Choose one event. What happened? Why was it important? How did you react? What did you learn? What will you do differently next time? For example, today I had a misunderstanding with a colleague. At first I felt annoyed, but later I realized that we had received different information. We discussed it calmly and solved the problem. Next time I will confirm the details earlier. This kind of daily reflection helps you organize experiences into clear speech. It also gives you repeated practice with common structures. At first, speaking during ordinary moments may feel strange. You may think, why am I talking to myself? But self-directed speech is not meaningless. It gives your brain a private space to practice retrieving and organizing English. You are not performing for anyone. You are strengthening the connection between thought and speech. The key is to keep the practice short and natural. Do not force yourself to describe every object, action, or thought throughout the entire day. That would become tiring. Choose a few moments that fit naturally into your routine. For example, 1 minute while preparing breakfast, 2 minutes during a walk, 1 short voice note after work, a brief summary before sleep. These small sessions are easier to continue than one long practice that requires perfect timing and high energy. You can also assign different types of practice to different moments. Morning, plans and intentions, travel, description and prediction, work break, summary and opinion. Evening, storytelling and reflection. This gives variety without requiring you to search for new activities every day. Another important rule is to use language that matches the moment. Do not force advanced vocabulary into a simple situation. If you are making tea, say what you would naturally need to say. If you are explaining a serious problem, use more detailed language. Real fluency grows when your English fits the situation. You should also avoid turning every ordinary moment into a grammar test. Speak first. Let the message come out. If you notice one important mistake, correct it after finishing. Suppose you say, I go to the market yesterday. Finish the thought first. I go to the market yesterday, but it was already closed. Then correct the key part. I went to the market yesterday, but it was already closed. Repeat the correct sentence once and continue with your day. This keeps the practice focused on communication while still supporting accuracy. Some learners worry that speaking alone may reinforce mistakes. That can happen if you never listen to correct English or receive feedback. The solution is balance. Use ordinary moments for fluency and expression. Use lessons, listening, correction tools, or teachers for accuracy and improvement. You need both. Input gives you models, speaking helps you use them. You can also compare your speech over time. Record the same type of activity once every week. For example, describe your day for 2 minutes every Sunday. After several weeks, listen to the earlier recordings. You may notice that your pauses are shorter, your ideas are better organized, and your sentences contain more detail. Daily progress can be difficult to see because it happens gradually. Recordings provide evidence that these ordinary moments are creating real improvement. Another useful method is the 1 moment, 3 versions exercise. Choose one event and explain it in 3 ways. First, give the shortest version. I missed the bus. Second, add a reason and result. I missed the bus because I left home late, so I had to wait for the next one. Third, tell the complete story. I was preparing to leave when I realized I couldn't find my keys. By the time I found them, I was already late. I ran to the bus stop, but the bus had just left, so I waited another 20 minutes. This teaches you how to expand ideas. In conversation, you can choose the version that matches the situation. A quick question may need 1 sentence. A friendly conversation may allow a fuller story. You can practice the same skill with opinions. Short version. I don't like working late. Expanded version. I don't like working late because I become less focused in the evening. Detailed version. I try to avoid working late because my concentration becomes weaker after a long day. I can still finish simple tasks, but difficult work usually takes much longer. This flexibility makes you a stronger communicator. Ordinary moments can also train your question skills. When you see or hear something, form 1 question about it. Why is the shop closed? When will the meeting begin? How does this machine work? What caused the delay? What would happen if? Questions keep your mind active and prepare you for real interaction. Speaking is not only answering. Fluent communication also requires curiosity and the ability to guide a conversation. You can then answer your own question or imagine how another person might answer. This creates a short conversational exchange rather than a single statement. Another useful habit is narrating a process after it is complete. Suppose you repaired something, completed an online form, prepared a meal, or solved a technical problem. Explain the steps afterward. First, I checked the connection. Then I restarted the device. That didn't work, so I changed the settings. Finally, the problem was solved. Process language is highly practical. It helps you explain work, give instructions, describe experiences, and tell stories in a clear order. You can use linking phrases such as, first, after that, the next step was, at first, eventually, in the end. These expressions make your speech easier to follow. The main goal is to stop seeing speaking practice as an activity that only begins when everything else stops. Your life does not need to pause so English can begin. English can enter the life you are already living. The walk becomes description. The decision becomes comparison. The mistake becomes explanation. The delay becomes reflection. The task becomes a process. The memory becomes a story. The plan becomes future language. The ordinary moment becomes practice. This approach removes one of the biggest excuses learners face: I don't have enough time. You may not have an extra hour every day, but you have many small moments. A few of those moments can be used more intentionally. 10 minutes spread across a day may feel easier than one 10-minute session. More importantly, the language becomes connected to different environments and emotions. You practice English while calm, busy, tired, curious, frustrated, and excited. That variety prepares you for real conversation because real speaking does not happen only when you feel ready. At first, you will need to remind yourself to use these moments. Later, the habit becomes more natural. You begin noticing speaking opportunities automatically. You see something unusual and form an English reaction. You make a decision and explain your reason. You finish an activity and summarize it. You face a problem and describe the solution. English begins following your day instead of waiting inside a notebook. That is the deeper purpose of this chapter. You are not trying to turn your entire life into a lesson. You are teaching your brain that English belongs in real life. It belongs in your plans, reactions, choices, routines, problems, interests, and memories. Every ordinary moment gives you something meaningful to say, and meaningful language is easier to remember because it is connected to a real purpose. Do not wait for an exciting topic. Do not wait for a speaking partner. Do not wait until you have a free afternoon. Use the next small moment. Describe what is happening. Give your opinion. Explain your choice. Tell the short story. Ask the question. Add one detail. Then continue with your day. These moments may appear too simple to create fluency, but fluency is not built only from difficult practice. It is built from frequent access. The easier it becomes to reach English during ordinary situations, the easier it becomes to reach English during real conversations. When you turn everyday life into speaking practice, English stops being an activity you must remember to do. It becomes a language that naturally travels with you. And once English begins traveling with you, every day provides another chance to speak a little more clearly, respond a little faster, and move one step closer to true fluency. Chapter 9. The confidence that comes before perfect English. Many English learners believe confidence will arrive after their English becomes perfect. They think they will speak freely when their grammar is stronger, their vocabulary is larger, their pronunciation is clearer, and their mistakes have almost disappeared. Until then, they stay quiet, avoid conversations, and continue preparing. But this creates a serious problem. Perfect English may never arrive in the way they imagine it. There will always be another word to learn, another pronunciation to improve, another sentence that could sound more natural, and another grammar point to review. If you wait until nothing can go wrong, you may spend years studying without ever becoming comfortable enough to speak. Confidence does not come after perfection. It grows while you are still imperfect. It begins when you understand that speaking English is not a performance in which every sentence must impress someone. It is communication. Your goal is to share an idea, ask a question, explain a problem, respond to another person, or create a connection. When the listener understands your meaning, communication has already happened, even if the sentence was not flawless. This is an important change because many learners judge themselves by standards that real speakers do not use. They believe every pause sounds weak, every mistake sounds embarrassing. Every forgotten word proves they are not ready. Every pronunciation difference makes them sound unsuccessful. As a result, they enter conversations with too much pressure. Instead of thinking about the person and the message, they watch themselves from the inside. They examine every word while speaking. They listen for errors before the sentence is even complete. Their attention becomes divided between communication and self-protection. That pressure makes speaking much harder. Confidence begins when you stop demanding a perfect performance from a developing skill. Think about any ability you have learned in life. You did not become confident before taking the first uncertain steps. You became confident because you took those steps, survived the discomfort, learned from the experience, and tried again. A person learning to drive does not wait until they feel completely calm before entering the car. They begin carefully. Their movements may be slow. They may check everything repeatedly. Over time, familiar actions require less thought. Confidence appears because experience has shown them what they can handle. Speaking English develops in the same way. At first, a simple conversation may feel difficult. You may need time to answer. You may choose the wrong word, lose your sentence, or ask the other person to repeat something. But every time you stay in the conversation, your brain receives a new message. I can do this, even when it is not perfect. That message is the beginning of real confidence. Confidence is not the belief that you will never make a mistake. It is the belief that a mistake will not destroy you. It is knowing that if a word disappears, you can explain the idea another way. If you misunderstand something, you can ask for clarification. If a sentence becomes confusing, you can restart it. If your pronunciation is unclear, you can repeat the word more slowly. If you feel nervous, you can still say the first sentence. This kind of confidence is practical. It is built on recovery, not perfection. Many learners imagine confident speakers as people who always know exactly what to say. But confident speakers also hesitate. They forget words. They change their sentences. They sometimes misunderstand questions. The difference is that they do not treat these moments as personal failures. They handle them and continue. They may say, "Let me explain that differently. I'm not sure I used the right word. What I mean is, could you repeat the last part? I know the idea, but I can't remember the word." These expressions protect the conversation while giving the speaker time to think. More importantly, they show that fluency includes managing difficulty. You do not need to hide every struggle. Sometimes speaking honestly about the struggle makes communication easier. Suppose someone asks you a question and you need a moment. Instead of panicking, you can say, "That's an interesting question. Let me think." This simple sentence changes the pause. It no longer feels like your mind has failed. It becomes a normal thinking moment. Suppose you forget a word. You can say, "I can't remember the exact word, but it means." Now the listener understands what is happening and may even help you. Suppose your sentence begins badly. You can say, "Let me start that again," then speak more simply. These are not weak responses. They are tools used by effective communicators. Confidence also grows when you separate your English ability from your intelligence and personal value. Making a mistake in English does not mean you are unintelligent. Needing more time does not mean your ideas are weak. Speaking with an accent does not mean your English is unsuccessful. Not understanding one sentence does not erase everything you already know. You are using a language that may not be your first language, that requires memory, attention, courage, and flexibility. The fact that you are communicating at all is evidence of learning, not evidence of failure. However, many learners carry painful memories from school, public speaking, or previous conversations. Perhaps someone corrected them harshly. Maybe others laughed at their pronunciation. Perhaps they forgot a simple word during an important moment. One uncomfortable experience can become a warning inside the mind. The next time they speak, they are not only dealing with English, they are also trying to prevent the same embarrassment from happening again. This makes every sentence feel dangerous. To rebuild confidence, you need new experiences that teach your brain a different lesson. These experiences do not need to be dramatic. They can be small and controlled. Answer one easy question aloud. Record a short message and listen without judging yourself. Speak with someone who is patient. Practice a common situation before it happens. Use one sentence during a real interaction. Ask one question instead of staying silent. Each safe experience weakens the belief that speaking always ends badly. Confidence is built from evidence. Telling yourself, "I am confident," may help temporarily. But using English successfully, even in a small way, gives your mind stronger proof. You asked a question and received an answer. You explained a problem and the other person understood. You forgot a word but continued. You felt nervous but still participated. You made a mistake and nothing terrible happened. These moments slowly change your identity. You begin seeing yourself as someone who can use English, not only someone who studies it. That identity matters. A learner who sees themselves only as a student may believe they are always preparing for real English. They think real English belongs to teachers, advanced speakers, native speakers, or people with more experience. A learner who sees themselves as a user understands that their English is already real. It may be simple, but it can still express real ideas. It may contain mistakes, but it can still create understanding. It may not sound advanced, but it can still solve problems, build relationships, and open opportunities. You do not become an English user after reaching a perfect level. You become an English user the moment you begin using the language for a real purpose. Another obstacle to confidence is comparison. You hear someone speaking quickly and smoothly and immediately compare their strongest moment with your weakest one. You forget that they may have practiced for many years, used English daily, studied abroad, worked in English, or made thousands of mistakes before you heard them. You see the result but not the history. This kind of comparison creates shame rather than guidance. A healthier comparison is between your present ability and your past ability. Could you understand this type of conversation 6 months ago? Can you now explain something that was difficult last year? Are you using expressions that once felt unfamiliar? Can you recover from mistakes more quickly? Do you speak for longer than before? These questions reveal real progress. Even small improvements matter because confidence grows when your attention learns to notice them. Many learners only notice what is missing. They finish a conversation and remember the 3 words they forgot. They ignore the 15 sentences they communicated successfully. They notice one grammar mistake, but forget that the listener understood the full story. They focus on one pronunciation problem and ignore the fact that they stayed in English for several minutes. This creates an unfair picture of their ability. After speaking, do not ask only, "What did I do wrong?" Also ask, "What did I communicate clearly? What sentence came more easily than before? How did I continue when I became stuck? What did I understand successfully? What will I improve next time?" This creates balanced reflection. You still learn from mistakes, but you do not allow mistakes to erase everything that worked. Confidence becomes stronger when correction is specific. Saying, "My English is terrible," gives you no useful direction. Saying, "I need more practice telling stories in the past," gives you a clear next step. Saying, "I cannot speak," is too broad and often untrue. Perhaps you can speak about familiar topics but struggle with unexpected questions. Perhaps you can explain your opinion but need more time to begin. Perhaps your vocabulary is good, but nervousness affects your speed. A specific problem can be trained. A general negative identity feels permanent. Change the language you use about your own progress. Instead of saying, "I'm bad at English," say, "I'm still building speed." Instead of, "I always freeze," say, "I need a reliable way to begin my answers." Instead of, "My pronunciation is awful," say, "There are several sounds I need to practice." Instead of, "I know nothing," say, "I understand more than I can currently express." This is not empty positivity. It is accurate thinking. Accuracy helps you improve without attacking yourself. Confidence also depends on preparation, but preparation should support speaking rather than replace it. Before entering a common situation, prepare the language you are likely to need. If you have a job interview, practice introducing yourself, explaining your experience, and answering predictable questions. If you need to speak with a customer, prepare phrases for greeting, clarifying, explaining, and solving problems. If you are attending a meeting, think about how you will share your main point, agree, disagree, or ask a question. Preparation reduces mental pressure because you are not building everything from zero, but do not memorize every word exactly. A memorized speech can create another kind of fear. If the other person interrupts or asks an unexpected question, you may lose the entire structure. Prepare ideas and useful phrases, not a rigid performance. For example, prepare. The main reason is, in my experience. One example would be, "I understand your concern. Could you explain what you mean by?" These phrases can support many different conversations. Confidence grows when you have reliable tools but remain flexible. Your physical behavior can also influence how confident you feel. When nervous, learners may speak too quietly, rush through sentences, stop breathing naturally, avoid eye contact, or apologize repeatedly. These habits make speaking feel even more difficult. Slow down slightly. Breathe before beginning. Speak loudly enough to be heard. Finish the sentence instead of allowing your voice to disappear at the end. Give yourself permission to pause. These small physical choices can create more control. Speaking quickly is not the same as speaking fluently. A calm, clear answer often sounds more confident than a fast answer filled with panic. You may think you need to hide your nervousness by speaking faster, but rushing gives your brain less time and increases mistakes. A steady pace allows your thoughts and speech to remain connected. Confidence is also affected by the difficulty of the situations you choose. If you only practice privately for years and then suddenly expect yourself to speak confidently in front of a large group, the jump may be too great. Confidence develops more effectively through gradual challenges. Begin with self-talk, then record short voice notes. Next, speak with one trusted person. Join a short online conversation. Ask a simple question in a real situation. Speak for a few minutes with someone unfamiliar. Participate in a group. Give a short presentation. Each step prepares you for the next. The goal is not to remain comfortable forever. The goal is to increase the challenge slowly enough that your brain can learn from success. If an experience feels difficult but manageable, it can strengthen you. If it feels overwhelming, you may only remember the fear. Choose challenges that stretch you without completely shutting you down. Another part of confidence is accepting your current voice in English. Some learners dislike how they sound. Their English voice feels unfamiliar, less expressive, or less intelligent than their first language voice. They may feel that their real personality disappears when speaking. This is understandable. In your first language, you can be funny, precise, emotional, persuasive, and spontaneous. In English, you may only have enough language to express a simpler version of yourself. That can feel frustrating. But your English personality is not fixed. It develops as your language grows. At first, you may use basic sentences. Later, you learn how to show humor, politeness, disagreement, excitement, sympathy, and personality. You become better at choosing the tone that matches your intention. Do not reject your English voice because it is still developing. Use it, and it will become richer. You do not need to sound exactly like a native speaker to sound confident. You need to sound clear, present, and connected to your message. Your accent is part of your language history. Improving pronunciation is useful when it makes communication clearer, but trying to erase every trace of your first language can create unnecessary pressure. Focus on understandable sounds, clear word stress, natural rhythm, and strong sentence endings. Your goal is not to hide where you come from. Your goal is to make your meaning easy to understand. Confidence increases when your target becomes realistic. Another important skill is learning to survive an imperfect conversation. Perhaps you misunderstand part of the question. Maybe you answer in a way that feels too simple. You might use the wrong tense, repeat yourself, or forget an important detail. The conversation is still valuable. It has shown you what real speaking requires. Afterward, choose one improvement and practice it. Do not replay the entire conversation as evidence of failure. Ask, what would I like to say more clearly next time? Then create a better version. Suppose someone asked about your work and your answer felt disorganized. Later, record a clearer response. Add a beginning, one or two details, and a conclusion. The difficult conversation becomes material for growth. This is how confidence and competence develop together. You speak, you notice, you improve, you try again. Confidence without practice can become unrealistic. Practice without confidence can become painful. You need both. You need enough confidence to enter the conversation and enough reflection to keep improving. One helpful method is to create a success record. At the end of each week, write down a few things you managed to do in English. Perhaps you spoke for 3 minutes without stopping. Maybe you understood a fast conversation better than before. You asked someone to repeat a sentence instead of pretending. You used a new phrase naturally. You corrected yourself without becoming embarrassed. You gave an opinion in a group. These records remind you that progress is happening, especially during periods when improvement feels slow. Language growth is not always obvious. Some weeks you may not feel different, but small abilities are becoming stronger underneath the surface. A success record provides evidence when your emotions tell you that nothing is changing. You should also be careful about the people and environments you choose. Confidence can grow faster around people who are patient, supportive, and focused on communication. It can weaken around people who constantly interrupt, laugh, or correct every small mistake. Not every person deserves access to your early practice. Choose safe environments when possible. Speak with people who allow you to finish your idea. Join communities where learners support each other. Find teachers or partners who correct respectfully and at the right time. This does not mean avoiding all difficult people forever. It means giving your confidence enough space to develop before exposing it to unnecessary pressure. When correction is needed, ask for a useful kind of correction. You might say, "Please correct the mistakes that affect meaning." Or, "Let me finish first, then tell me the two most important things to improve." This keeps communication moving and prevents correction from becoming overwhelming. Confidence also changes when you stop apologizing for your English before every conversation. Some learners begin with, "Sorry, my English is very bad." This statement may feel polite, but it immediately places you in a weaker position. It tells your brain and the listener to expect failure. Instead, you can say, "English is not my first language, so I may need a moment," or simply begin speaking. You do not need to apologize for learning. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to ask. You are allowed to express yourself with simple language. You are allowed to improve in public. That permission is important. Many learners wait for someone else to give them permission to speak. They want a teacher to confirm they are ready, but readiness is not a certificate. It develops through use. You are ready enough to use the English you have today. You may not be ready for every situation, but you are ready for one sentence, one question, one response, and one small conversation. Begin there. Another way to build confidence is to prepare recovery phrases until they become automatic. Practice saying, "Let me think for a moment. I'm not sure how to say it. Let me explain it another way. Could you repeat that more slowly? Do you mean?" I don't know the exact word, but what I'm trying to say is, these phrases reduce fear because they give you options when something goes wrong. Without recovery language, a difficult moment can feel like the end of the conversation. With it, the moment becomes manageable. You know what to do. Confidence often comes from having a plan for difficulty, not from believing difficulty will never happen. It is also helpful to practice beginning your answers. Many learners know what they want to say, but become nervous during the first few seconds. Once they begin, the rest becomes easier. Create several comfortable openings. I think the main point is, for me, the biggest difference is, in my experience, one reason might be, I haven't thought about it deeply, but, from what I understand, a familiar opening gives your brain time to prepare the next idea. Starting successfully creates momentum, and momentum supports confidence. Do not judge your entire speaking ability by the first few seconds of nervousness. Sometimes the body needs time to settle into the conversation. Continue for a little longer before deciding how well you are doing. Confidence can also come from knowing that simple English is powerful. A clear sentence is better than a complicated sentence that becomes lost halfway through. Instead of trying to say, "The primary reason for my dissatisfaction was related to the unexpected alteration in the arrangement," you can say, "I was unhappy because the plan changed suddenly." The second sentence is direct, natural, and easier to deliver confidently. Advanced English is useful, but complexity is not the same as fluency. Fluent speakers often choose the simplest, clear way to express an idea. You can do the same. When you feel pressure, reduce the sentence, give one idea at a time. Use familiar words, add detail after the main point is clear. This makes speaking more stable. For example, instead of planning a long answer, begin, "I disagree," then explain, "I disagree because the plan may cost too much." Then add an example. For example, "We would need to hire more people." The answer grows step by step. You do not need to hold everything in your mind at once. This method reduces fear and improves organization. Confidence also requires patience with progress. Some days, English will feel easy, words will appear quickly, and your sentences will flow. On another day, you may feel slow. A common word may disappear, and even simple answers may require effort. This does not mean your ability has suddenly become worse. Sleep, stress, tiredness, mood, and unfamiliar topics all affect performance. Do not turn one difficult day into a final judgment about your English. Continue calmly. Your level is not defined by one conversation. Progress is the pattern created over many weeks and months. Confident learners understand that performance changes, but they keep using the language. They do not require every session to prove that they are improving. Sometimes the practice is difficult, but it still keeps the connection alive. Another important form of confidence is the ability to say, "I don't know." Fluency does not mean having an answer to every question. Sometimes the difficulty is not English. You simply do not have enough information or have never considered the topic. You can say, "I'm not familiar with that subject. I don't know enough to give a strong opinion. I've never thought about that before. I'm not sure, but my first reaction is." These are complete, intelligent responses. Do not confuse not knowing the answer with not knowing English. The pressure to create an impressive answer can make speaking harder than necessary. Be honest about what you know, then express it clearly. Confidence also appears in listening. You do not need to understand every word before responding. Focus on the main idea. Notice the speaker's tone. Use the context. Ask for the missing detail when necessary. You can say, "I understood the main point, but I missed the last part." Or, "Are you saying that the schedule has changed?" This shows active communication. Pretending to understand creates more fear because you worry that the misunderstanding will become obvious later. Asking a clear question gives you control. The more you handle these moments successfully, the less frightening real conversations become. Eventually, confidence changes the way your brain approaches English. Instead of asking, "What if I make a mistake?" you begin asking, "What do I want to communicate?" Instead of thinking, "I hope they don't judge me," you think, "I need to make this idea clear." Instead of searching for the perfect sentence, you begin with the best sentence available. Your attention moves outward toward the conversation instead of inward toward constant self-monitoring. That shift makes speaking feel more natural. It also helps your English improve because your brain can focus on meaning, response, and connection. Perfect English is not the doorway to confidence. Confidence is part of the doorway to better English. When you speak with growing confidence, you use the language more often. More use gives you more experience. More experience reveals what you need to improve. Improvement makes future conversations easier. This creates a positive cycle. You speak before you feel perfect. You survive the discomfort. You learn from the experience. You become slightly more confident. You speak again. Each round strengthens both your language and your trust in yourself. The opposite cycle also exists. You wait for perfection. You avoid speaking. You gain little real experience. Speaking remains unfamiliar. Your fear grows. You decide you need even more preparation. Breaking that cycle requires one small act of courage. Say the sentence before you feel completely ready. Ask the question. Join the conversation. Send the voice message. Give the opinion. Let the English be imperfect but real. Confidence does not need to be loud. It does not mean dominating every conversation or pretending you are never nervous. Quiet confidence may sound like, "I need a moment, but I can answer. I made a mistake, but I can correct it. I don't know the word, but I can explain it. My English is still growing, but I can communicate." This is strong because it is realistic. It does not depend on perfection. It depends on adaptability. The purpose of learning English is not to become someone who never struggles. It is to become someone who can continue through the struggle. You will still meet difficult accents. You will still hear unfamiliar expressions. You will still face topics you have not practiced. You will still make mistakes, but these things will no longer have the power to silence you. You will know how to ask, simplify, explain, pause, and continue. That is the confidence that comes before perfect English. It is not a reward waiting at the end of your journey. It is a skill you build during the journey. It grows every time you choose communication over fear. Every time you finish your idea despite a mistake. Every time you speak with the English available to you now. Every time you stop apologizing for being a learner. Every time you recognize that your voice matters even while it is still developing. Do not wait until your English is perfect before allowing yourself to sound confident. Speak clearly. Speak patiently. Speak simply when necessary. Allow mistakes to become corrections rather than conclusions. Let each conversation show you that you are more capable than fear suggested. Your confidence will not appear all at once. It will grow quietly through repeated proof that you can enter a conversation, face uncertainty, and still make yourself understood. And when that confidence becomes part of you, speaking English stops feeling like a dangerous test. it becomes what it was always meant to be, a way to share your thoughts, connect with people, and let your voice be heard. Chapter 10: Crossing the Line Where English Becomes Automatic. Automatic English does not mean speaking without thinking. It means speaking without rebuilding the language from the beginning every time. You still think about your message. You still choose what you want to say. You may still pause when the idea is difficult or the topic is unfamiliar. But your mind no longer needs to search for every basic word, inspect every grammar rule, and arrange every sentence piece by piece before your mouth can begin. The language starts moving with the thought. Someone asks you a familiar question, and an answer begins forming almost immediately. You hear a common expression and understand its meaning without mentally converting it into another language. You want to explain a simple problem, and the words arrive in a useful order. You may not speak perfectly, but you are no longer starting from an empty space. This is the line every serious learner wants to cross. On one side of that line, English feels like a subject you must control. On the other side, it begins to feel like a tool you can trust. Before crossing it, you may experience every sentence as a separate task. You first decide what you want to say in your native language. Then you search for the English vocabulary. After that, you try to remember the correct grammar. You arrange the words, check the tense, examine the pronunciation, and finally give yourself permission to speak. That process may work during a written exercise because you have time. In conversation, however, it becomes too slow. By the time your sentence is ready, the other person may have continued speaking, changed the subject, or started wondering whether you understood the question. Automatic speaking reduces this heavy preparation. Instead of building every sentence from individual words, your brain begins reaching for complete pieces of language. Expressions such as "I'm not sure," "the main reason is," "it depends on," "I didn't expect that," and "what I mean is," begin appearing as complete units. You do not analyze each word inside them, you simply use them. This is how much of natural communication works. Fluent speakers do not create every sentence from completely new material. They rely on thousands of familiar combinations that have been heard, understood, and used many times. When a familiar situation appears, a familiar language pattern appears with it. Consider the question, why did you decide to learn English? A learner who is still building every sentence manually may think, which tense should I use? Should I say "I decided" or "I have decided"? What word should come after "because"? Is "better opportunities" correct? A learner with stronger automatic ability may begin, "The main reason is that I want better opportunities." The opening arrives as one familiar piece. While saying it, the speaker's mind prepares the next idea. "I also want to communicate with people from different countries." The whole answer was not prepared in advance. It developed while the person was speaking. That is an important sign of automaticity. Your brain and mouth begin cooperating in real time. At first, you may think first and speak later. With practice, you begin thinking while speaking. Eventually, familiar parts of the message require so little attention that you can focus more deeply on meaning, emotion, and connection. This does not happen because you discover one magical technique. It happens because useful English has traveled through your mind often enough to become familiar. You have heard it, you have understood it, you have repeated it, you have changed it, you have connected it to your own life. You have used it in several situations. Each meeting strengthens the pathway until the language becomes easier to retrieve. Think about a path through a field. The first time you walk across it, the grass is high and the direction is unclear. You need to move slowly and watch every step. If you walk the same route repeatedly, the path becomes easier to see. Your feet begin following it without constant attention. English works in a similar way. The first time you express an idea, the route may feel difficult. You search for words, lose your sentence, and need several attempts. When you express the same type of idea again, the process becomes slightly easier. After enough meaningful repetition, your brain recognizes the route. You are not memorizing one fixed answer. You are strengthening a pathway that can carry many different answers. For example, the pattern. One reason is that can support many topics. One reason is that English gives me more career opportunities. One reason is that the journey takes too long. One reason is that I prefer working independently. One reason is that the price is too high. One reason is that I need more time to decide. The structure becomes automatic while the meaning continues to change. This is much more powerful than memorizing a complete speech. A memorized speech only works in one exact situation. A flexible pattern can travel across hundreds of conversations. Automatic English is built from this combination: stable language patterns and changing personal meaning. One mistake learners make is trying to automate advanced language before basic language feels dependable. They search for sophisticated vocabulary, complex grammar, and impressive expressions while still struggling to answer ordinary questions. This creates unnecessary pressure. Automatic speaking begins with the language you need most often: greetings, introductions, preferences, daily routines, common problems, plans, reasons, opinions, clarification, agreement and disagreement, short stories, requests, reactions. These areas may appear simple, but they form the foundation of everyday communication. When they become easier, your mind has more space for difficult ideas. Suppose someone asks, "What did you do this weekend?" If answering this familiar question still requires intense concentration, your brain is using a large amount of energy on basic construction. But after you have told many short stories about your weekend, familiar language becomes available. On Saturday, I spent most of the day. Later, I decided to. The best part was, I didn't have much time, but. These patterns reduce the effort required to organize the story. You can focus more on what actually happened. This is why repeating common topics is valuable. You are not repeating because you have nothing new to learn. You are repeating so familiar communication becomes easier. The goal is not to memorize one perfect answer about your weekend. The goal is to make the storytelling process familiar. One week, you say, "I stayed home because I was tired." The next week, "I visited my family and helped them with something." Later, "I planned to rest, but a friend invited me out." The content changes, but the speaking pathway becomes stronger. Automaticity also appears in listening. At an early stage, you may hear English as a long stream of separate sounds. Your mind tries to identify each word, remember its meaning, and combine everything into a complete message. By the time you understand the beginning, the speaker has already reached the end. With repeated exposure, common sound patterns become recognizable. You no longer need to inspect every word. When someone says, "What are you going to do?" you understand the complete intention, even if the words are connected and reduced in natural speech. When you hear, "I'm not sure yet," the meaning arrives immediately. When a speaker says, "It depends on what happens," you recognize the expression as one complete idea. Automatic listening and automatic speaking support each other. The language you understand quickly is easier to use, and the language you use frequently becomes easier to recognize. This is why active practice should not be separated completely from listening. You need clear models of real English, but you also need to take useful language from those models and make it your own. A helpful process is, listen to a short piece of natural English, choose one expression that fits your life, repeat it clearly, create several personal examples. Use it again later without looking. Suppose you hear, "I haven't had a chance to," you can connect it to your life. "I haven't had a chance to finish the report. I haven't had a chance to call my friend. I haven't had a chance to watch that film. I haven't had a chance to think about it properly." Now the phrase is not only something you understood, it is becoming something you can retrieve. After using it across several days, you may notice it appearing naturally when the right situation occurs. You want to explain that something remains unfinished, and the expression arrives without a long search. That moment may feel small, but it is evidence that English is becoming automatic. The change often happens quietly. You may not wake up one morning and suddenly feel fluent. Instead, you notice small differences. You answer a question before translating it. You use a phrase you did not consciously prepare. You continue speaking after forgetting a word. You understand the main idea without catching every detail. You tell a short story with fewer pauses. You correct yourself without losing the conversation. You realize you have been thinking in English for several seconds without trying. These moments are signs that your brain is building faster connections. Do not ignore them because they are not dramatic. Automaticity grows through accumulated small improvements. A learner may still make many mistakes while becoming more automatic. Speed and accuracy do not always develop at exactly the same rate. At first, when you stop controlling every word, some errors may appear more often. You may use the wrong tense, forget an ending, or choose a slightly unnatural phrase. This can make you believe that speaking more freely is damaging your English. It is not. It means your brain is learning to produce language under real conditions. You still need correction, but correction should refine the system rather than stop it completely. For example, you may repeatedly say, "He go to work early." The sentence is already available quickly, but one part needs improvement. Instead of slowing down every future sentence to analyze the grammar, focus on that pattern during a separate correction moment. He goes to work early. She goes to work early. My brother goes to work early. Everyone in that office goes to work early. Then return to speaking. The goal is to replace an automatic incorrect pattern with an automatic correct one through focused repetition. This is more effective than criticizing yourself every time the mistake appears. Criticism creates tension. Clear correction creates a better pathway. Automatic English is not careless English. It is language that has become available through familiarity. Accuracy can continue improving as availability grows. You should also understand that different parts of your English may become automatic at different times. You may speak comfortably about your family but struggle when discussing business. You may understand everyday conversations but find interviews difficult. You may tell stories easily but hesitate when giving detailed opinions. You may communicate well with friends but become nervous during formal meetings. This does not mean your progress is false. Automaticity is connected to experience. The situations you have practiced most will usually feel easier. A person who uses English every day at work may speak confidently about projects, schedules, and problems, but struggle to describe emotions or personal experiences. Another learner may discuss films and daily life naturally, but need preparation for professional topics. Your English becomes automatic in layers. First, familiar words, then useful phrases, then common questions, then practice topics, then wider situations. Each layer supports the next. This is why you should not judge your complete ability based on one difficult conversation. An unfamiliar topic may temporarily make your English feel slower. The language has not disappeared. Your mind simply needs more time because the pathway is less familiar. When this happens, simplify. Use common sentence openings. Give one main idea. Add one reason. Use an example. Ask for a moment if necessary. Suppose someone asks a complex question about technology and society. You may not have practiced the topic. Instead of trying to create a perfect answer, begin with a simple structure. I think technology has both advantages and disadvantages. Then add one clear point. One advantage is that communication has become much easier. Then explain. For example, people can work together even when they live in different countries. Your familiar language structures carry you through the unfamiliar topic. This is one of the greatest benefits of automatic foundations. They give you stability when the content becomes difficult. Another major change happens when you stop monitoring every sentence while producing it. At the beginning, your attention is often directed toward the language itself. Is this correct? Is the tense right? Did I pronounce that word properly? Does this sound natural? These questions may be useful during study, but they are too heavy during every moment of conversation. As English becomes more automatic, your attention begins moving toward the message. Does the other person understand me? What detail should I add? How do I feel about this? What question should I ask next? What is the main point? This shift is essential because real communication requires attention to people, meaning, tone, and response. You cannot fully connect with another person while constantly inspecting yourself. Automatic language frees mental space. You begin listening more carefully because you are not preparing every possible answer in advance. You respond to what the person actually said, rather than delivering a memorized sentence. You notice emotion, humor, uncertainty, and disagreement. English becomes interaction instead of performance. That is where conversations begin feeling more natural. A common mistake is to chase speed too early. Learners hear fluent speakers and believe automatic English must be extremely fast. They start rushing, swallowing sounds, and forcing sentences before the ideas are ready. This often creates more confusion. Automatic does not mean rushed, it means available. A calm sentence that arrives without translation is more automatic than a fast sentence produced with panic. A speaker can pause and still be fluent. They may be thinking about the idea, not struggling with basic language. Native speakers also pause when a question is difficult, when they want to choose a precise word, or when they are organizing a complicated explanation. Do not measure automaticity only by how quickly your mouth moves. Measure it by how easily familiar English appears. Can you begin without translating? Can you continue when the wording changes? Can you express the same idea in another way? Can you respond to an unexpected detail? Can you recover after a mistake? Can you stay focused on meaning? These are stronger signs than speed alone. Automatic English also depends on emotional familiarity. You may know the necessary vocabulary, but fear can make that vocabulary difficult to reach. During private practice, your words may flow. In front of another person, your mind suddenly becomes crowded. This happens because your brain is managing both language and emotion. The solution is not only more vocabulary, you need repeated experiences of using English while feeling slightly uncomfortable. Begin with manageable pressure. Record yourself without restarting. Answer a question with a short time limit. Speak with one supportive person. Join a brief conversation. Ask one question in a real situation. Continue for 1 extra minute. Each experience teaches your mind that it can access English even when another person is listening. At first, nervousness may still be present, but your response to it becomes more automatic. Instead of freezing, you use a familiar opening. Instead of stopping, you simplify. Instead of pretending to understand, you ask for clarification. Instead of apologizing repeatedly, you continue with the message. These reactions become part of your speaking system. Automaticity is not only automatic language, it is also automatic recovery. When a word disappears, what do you do? When you misunderstand, how do you respond? When the sentence becomes too complicated, how do you repair it? A strong speaker has familiar responses for these moments. I don't know the exact word, but it's something that... Could you explain that last part? Let me say it in a simpler way. That's not exactly what I meant. Let me start again. The main point is, these phrases keep the conversation moving while your mind reorganizes. Practice them before you need them. When recovery language becomes automatic, fear loses some of its power because a difficult moment no longer feels like a dead end. You have a way forward. Another part of crossing the line is accepting that automatic English grows through use, not through waiting. Many learners believe they must first gain enough knowledge, then confidence, and finally automatic speaking. In reality, these areas develop together. You use English with limited knowledge. That use reveals what is missing. You learn something relevant. You use it again. It becomes more familiar. Your confidence grows. You enter more situations. Your ability expands. This cycle repeats. There is no point where learning is completely finished and speaking officially begins. Speaking is one of the ways learning happens. You cross the line gradually each time you use English before feeling completely ready. The English you use today becomes easier to use tomorrow. The sentence you struggled to express this week may become natural next month. The conversation that feels frightening now may become ordinary after repeated experience. Automaticity is the result of familiarity created through contact. You cannot think your way into complete familiarity. You must experience the language. This means speaking aloud matters. Thinking in English is useful, but your mouth also needs practice producing the sounds, rhythm, and movement of sentences. A phrase may feel clear inside your mind, but become difficult when spoken. Say it. Notice where your mouth slows down. Repeat it naturally. Use it inside a complete sentence. Change the sentence. Return to it later. For example, you may understand the phrase, I would rather, but speaking it smoothly may feel unfamiliar. Practice. I would rather stay home. I would rather wait until tomorrow. I would rather speak to her directly. I would rather take the earlier train. Then use it in a fuller response. Would you like to go out tonight? I would rather stay home because I have an early meeting tomorrow. The structure becomes easier because your mind and mouth have experienced it together. Pronunciation practice should also support automatic communication rather than become an endless search for perfection. Focus on clarity, common sound connections, word stress, and rhythm. Practice complete expressions, not only isolated words. Instead of repeating comfortable 20 times alone, place it in useful sentences. This chair is comfortable. I don't feel comfortable asking that question. I'm becoming more comfortable speaking English. Complete sentences teach pronunciation in context. They also connect sound with meaning, which makes the language easier to retrieve. Automatic English is often rhythmic. Familiar phrases have a flow that helps the speaker produce them as one unit. Expressions such as, I don't really know, as far as I know, at the end of the day, the first thing I noticed was, I'm looking forward to, become easier when practiced as complete patterns rather than separate words. Listening closely to natural rhythm, repeating it, and then using the expression in your own message can make speech feel smoother. But do not copy sound without meaning. A phrase becomes truly useful when you understand when and why people use it. Automaticity requires connection between form, meaning, and situation. You know the words, you understand the intention, you recognize the context, you can produce the expression when that context appears. Suppose you learn, that's not necessarily true. You should understand that it is a polite way to question a statement without directly saying the person is completely wrong. Use it in different contexts. People say you must live abroad to become fluent, but that's not necessarily true. Expensive products are always better. That's not necessarily true. Some people think confidence means never feeling nervous, but that's not necessarily true. Now the expression carries a communicative purpose. Later, when someone makes a statement you partly disagree with, the phrase may appear naturally. That is automatic language tied to real intention. You can strengthen this process by organizing practice around functions instead of only topics. A topic is travel. A function is explaining a problem, making a request, giving a reason, comparing options, or telling a story. The same functions appear in many topics. If you practice giving reasons, you can use that ability when discussing travel, work, education, health, money, or relationships. Useful reason patterns include, the main reason is, one reason is that happened because, what made me decide was, the reason I prefer it is. When these become automatic, they support communication everywhere. The same is true for comparison. This one is more, the main difference is, compared with. Both are useful, but I prefer the first option because, and clarification. Do you mean, are you saying that? Could you explain that part? I understood the main idea, but these language functions form the machinery of conversation. Topics change. The machinery continues working. You can also create automatic speaking by repeatedly answering families of related questions. Instead of practicing one isolated question, practice several questions that require similar language. For example, questions about preferences. What kind of films do you enjoy? Do you prefer working alone or with others? Would you rather live in a large city or a small town? What type of learning method works best for you? These questions train opinion, comparison, and reasons. Questions about past experiences. What did you do last weekend? Tell me about a difficult decision. Describe a time when something did not go as planned. What is one experience you will always remember? These train storytelling. Questions about the future. What are your plans for next year? What skill would you like to develop? Where would you like to travel? What changes do you expect in your life? Practicing related questions strengthens reusable patterns without memorizing one speech. Automaticity grows when your brain learns how to perform a communication task repeatedly. Another sign that English is becoming automatic is your ability to paraphrase. At an earlier stage, you may believe there is only one correct way to express your idea. If you cannot remember that sentence, the entire message stops. Later, you realize that one meaning can be expressed in many ways. You want to say, I was exhausted, but the word does not arrive. You can say, I was extremely tired, or I had no energy left, or I was so tired that I could barely continue. The language changes, but the meaning survives. Paraphrasing shows that your mind is working with ideas rather than depending on one memorized form. You can train this deliberately. Choose one sentence and express it in several ways. I don't agree. I see it differently. I'm not sure I share that opinion. I understand the point, but I have a different view. Or, the meeting was cancelled. They decided not to hold the meeting. The meeting will not happen as planned. We were told that the meeting was called off. You do not need to use every version in real conversation. The exercise teaches flexibility. Flexible English becomes automatic more easily because your brain has several possible routes to the same meaning. Automaticity also changes how you react to unknown words. At first, one unfamiliar word may make you lose the entire sentence. You become focused on what you missed and stop following what comes next. As listening becomes stronger, you learn to continue. You use the surrounding words. You notice the situation. You pay attention to the speaker's tone. You decide whether the unknown word is essential. Sometimes, the main idea remains clear without it. This is an important automatic listening response. Continue first, investigate later. Real conversations do not pause every time you meet an unfamiliar word. You need the ability to stay connected to the message. If the word is important, ask, what does that word mean? Or, when you say that, do you mean? If it is not important, let the conversation continue. Choosing what deserves attention is part of fluent communication. Your brain has limited energy. Automatic skills help it use that energy wisely. Basic language requires less attention, so you can focus on important details. Familiar pronunciation patterns require less effort, so you can listen for intention. Common sentence structures arrive more quickly, so you can organize deeper ideas. This is similar to learning any complex skill. A beginner driver thinks about every movement, the mirrors, the pedals, the steering wheel, the signs, and the other vehicles. An experienced driver performs many basic actions automatically, which allows greater attention to the road. In English, automatic foundations give you freedom to manage the complete conversation. You can listen, think, respond, notice reactions, and adjust your message. Without those foundations, basic sentence construction consumes most of your attention. That is why automaticity feels like mental freedom. You are not using less intelligence. You are using your attention more effectively. There may be times when progress appears to stop. You continue practicing, but speaking does not feel dramatically different. This can be frustrating. However, automatic learning often develops beneath conscious awareness. Your brain is noticing repeated patterns. Sound combinations are becoming familiar. Common structures are being strengthened. Vocabulary is connecting to more situations. The visible improvement may appear later. Suddenly, an expression you have heard many times comes out naturally. You understand a sentence that once sounded too fast. You answer without preparing. The change feels sudden, but the preparation was gradual. Do not abandon useful practice simply because every day does not produce an obvious breakthrough. Automaticity depends on accumulated experience. At the same time, repetition should remain meaningful. Repeating a sentence mechanically hundreds of times without attention may improve mouth movement, but it may not help you use the sentence naturally. Change the context. Connect the language to a new experience. Ask a question that requires the pattern. Use the expression in a short story. Respond to an imaginary situation. Bring the phrase back several days later. Meaningful variation teaches your brain how the language behaves. Suppose you want to automate. I'm used to. Use it for routines. I'm used to waking up early. Use it for environments. I'm used to working in a busy office. Use it for emotions. I'm used to speaking with close friends, but not with strangers. Use it in contrast. I wasn't used to the weather at first, but now it feels normal. Use it in a question. Are you used to working under pressure? Now you understand not only the words, but the flexibility of the structure. This makes retrieval more reliable. Another valuable practice is delayed recall. Many learners use a phrase while looking directly at the lesson and believe they have learned it. But the real test comes later, when the example is no longer visible. After learning an expression, return to it several hours later. Can you remember it? Can you use it in a new sentence? Can you include it in a short answer? Return again the next day, then several days later. Each successful retrieval strengthens the pathway more than simply rereading the phrase. Your brain learns that this language must remain available. You can create a simple weekly system. Choose a small number of useful expressions. Use them on the first day with personal examples. On the second day, answer questions containing them. On the third day, tell a short story using 2 or 3. Later in the week, try to use them without preparation. At the end of the week, decide which expressions have become easier and which need more contact. This is slower than collecting large vocabulary lists, but it creates more usable English. Automaticity values depth over quantity. It is better to have 2,000 words and expressions you can access than 10,000 you only recognize. Recognition is useful, but conversation depends on retrieval. When someone speaks, you need to recognize meaning. When you respond, you need to retrieve language. A balanced learning system develops both. You can strengthen retrieval by creating speaking prompts instead of only vocabulary lists. Instead of writing reliable = dependable, write a question. What makes a person reliable? Then answer. A reliable person keeps promises, arrives on time, and does what they say they will do. Now the word has entered a complete idea. Instead of only memorizing avoid, ask, what is one habit you are trying to avoid? Then answer personally. This type of practice trains the language for communication rather than testing alone. As English becomes more automatic, you may also notice a change in your sense of correctness. At first, you depend heavily on rules. You know a sentence is correct because you can explain the grammar. Later, some expressions simply begin to sound right because you have heard and used them many times. You may not be consciously thinking about the rule, but your brain has absorbed the pattern. This intuitive feeling is useful, though it should be built from accurate exposure. Regular contact with clear, natural English helps your brain notice common structures. For example, after hearing interested in many times, interested on may begin to sound wrong even before you remember the rule. After using I've been working repeatedly in appropriate contexts, the structure begins feeling familiar. This language instinct develops slowly through meaningful exposure and active use. It does not replace grammar completely. Grammar can explain patterns and help correct confusion, but intuition allows you to use those patterns without analyzing them every time. That is another part of crossing the line. Rules move from conscious knowledge into practical instinct. You should not expect every grammar point to become equally automatic. Some structures appear constantly in daily communication and become familiar quickly. Others are rare, formal, or complex and may continue requiring thought. That is normal. Even advanced speakers pause when expressing complicated ideas. Automatic English does not remove all difficulty. It reduces unnecessary difficulty in familiar communication. Your goal is not to become a machine that produces instant sentences on every subject. Your goal is to create reliable access to the language you need most. Once that foundation is strong, you can continue expanding it. Choose a new communication area. Learn its common language. Listen to real examples. Practice personal use. Repeat it across situations. Allow it to become familiar. Then move outward again. This is how your speaking world grows. First, you manage introductions, then daily conversations, then storytelling, then opinions, then professional discussions, then complex or unfamiliar topics. The exact order will depend on your life. Your needs should guide your practice. Someone preparing for university may focus on explaining arguments, asking academic questions, and summarizing information. A professional may need meetings, presentations, negotiations, and workplace problem solving. A traveler may need requests, directions, bookings, and casual conversation. Automatic English becomes most powerful when it is built around real use. Ask yourself, where do I most need English to work automatically? Which situations make me hesitate? What questions do people often ask me? What ideas do I repeatedly need to explain? What expressions would help me manage those moments? Your answers can become a personal automaticity plan. Choose one situation, not 20. Suppose you struggle with introducing yourself professionally. Build the language for that situation, your role, your experience, your responsibilities, your current goals, a recent achievement, a question for the other person. Practice different versions so you are not depending on one memorized script. Then use the language in real or simulated conversations. Once the situation feels more dependable, choose another area. This targeted approach creates visible practical improvement. You may never feel that all English has become automatic, but you will have more and more areas where you can trust yourself. But trust changes your relationship with conversation. You stop entering every interaction expecting failure. You know that certain parts are familiar. You have openings, you have patterns, you have recovery phrases, you have experience. Even when the conversation becomes difficult, you are not starting from nothing. Eventually, the line between practice and real communication begins to disappear. You no longer think, now I am studying English. You are watching something interesting. You are explaining your opinion. You are solving a problem. You are talking with a friend. You are learning about a subject. You are making a plan. You are telling a story. English is simply the language carrying the activity. This is one of the clearest signs that it is becoming automatic. Your attention moves away from the fact that you are using English. You are more interested in what is happening through English. The language becomes transparent. It allows you to reach the person, idea, story, or goal on the other side. This does not mean you stop learning. In fact, learning often becomes richer because you notice gaps during real use. You try to explain something and discover that you need better vocabulary. You hear a natural phrase and realize it would make your speech clearer. You notice a repeated grammar mistake. You struggle to organize a story. These discoveries guide your study. Instead of learning randomly, you learn based on communication needs. Then you return to real use with better tools. This is the complete cycle. Experience, notice, learn, practice, use, refine, repeat. The missing step between studying and speaking is not one isolated exercise. It is this continuous movement from knowledge into use. Automaticity appears when that movement happens often enough. You do not study a phrase and leave it inside the lesson. You carry it into thought. You place it into speech. You connect it to life. You return to it later. You let it serve a real purpose. Eventually, you no longer need to consciously retrieve the lesson. The language is simply there when the situation calls for it. Crossing the line also requires letting go of constant proof. Some learners test themselves in every conversation. Am I fluent now? Did I speak perfectly? Was I fast enough? Did I sound like a native speaker? This pressure prevents natural development. Every interaction becomes an examination. Instead, allow conversations to be experiences. Sometimes you will speak well. Sometimes you will struggle. Sometimes you will discover a weakness. Sometimes you will surprise yourself. All of these experiences contribute to automatic ability. Judge progress across time, not sentence by sentence. Look for broader changes. Are familiar answers arriving more quickly? Are pauses becoming calmer? Can you speak for longer? Can you use simpler language when necessary? Can you stay in English after making a mistake? Are common expressions appearing without preparation? Can you understand more at natural speed? Do you feel less exhausted after speaking? These signs reveal that the process is working. Automatic English often feels lighter. In the beginning, 10 minutes of conversation may leave you mentally tired because every sentence requires conscious construction. Later, the same conversation uses less energy. You can listen and respond for longer. You enjoy the interaction more. You remember the subject rather than only your mistakes. You may even forget that you were speaking in a second language for a few moments. Those moments are important. They show that English is no longer standing between you and the conversation. It is carrying you through it. Still, automaticity is not permanent without use. A language pathway becomes weaker when it remains inactive for a long time. You may still understand the language, but speaking begins to feel slower. This is why regular contact matters even after you improve. You do not need intense daily study forever, but you do need ways to keep English alive. Conversations, listening, reading, voice messages, professional use, personal reflection, learning something through English. The exact activity can change, but the language needs movement. Automaticity is maintained through continued access. The good news is that maintenance feels different from early learning. You are no longer forcing every basic connection. You are using a system that already exists and continuing to strengthen it. New words enter more easily because they connect to a larger network. New topics become manageable because familiar structures support them. New conversations feel less threatening because you know how to recover. Your progress begins supporting future progress. That is the power of crossing the line. The learner does not disappear. You will always have more to learn, but the user becomes stronger. You no longer wait for English to be complete. You trust it enough to use it now. You let your current ability carry real meaning. You accept that some sentences will be simple. You accept that mistakes will happen. You accept that unfamiliar topics may slow you down. But you continue communicating. That continued use is what makes the language more automatic. Every conversation strengthens retrieval. Every explanation improves organization. Every correction refines a pattern. Every recovery builds flexibility. Every meaningful experience gives English a deeper place in your memory. Automatic English is not created through pressure. It is created through repeated permission. Permission to begin before the full sentence is ready. Permission to use simple words. Permission to pause. Permission to correct yourself. Permission to explain instead of remembering the perfect term. Permission to communicate while still learning. When you give yourself that permission repeatedly, your mind stops treating English as a dangerous test. The language becomes familiar territory. You know how to enter. You know how to move forward. You know what to do when the path becomes unclear. That familiarity is what allows speaking to flow. You may still think carefully about important ideas. You may still search for precise words. You may still ask for clarification. Automaticity does not remove thought. It removes the unnecessary struggle around basic communication. You can focus on the story instead of the tense, the person instead of your pronunciation, the purpose instead of the performance, the meaning instead of the fear. That is the line you are crossing, not from imperfect English to perfect English, not from learner to native speaker, not from hesitation to endless speed. You are crossing from conscious construction into dependable use, from knowing English to accessing it, from preparing to communicate to actually communicating, from carrying English in notebooks to carrying it inside your responses. The crossing happens one sentence at a time. One familiar phrase becomes available. One answer begins without translation. One conversation lasts longer. One mistake no longer stops you. One idea reaches another person clearly, then another, and another. Eventually, the change becomes impossible to ignore. English still belongs to your learning journey, but it no longer feels trapped inside lessons. It begins appearing where you need it, in decisions, reactions, explanations, questions, stories, and real human connection. That is when English becomes more than something you know. It becomes something you can reach, something you can trust, something you can use without asking your mind for permission every time. And that is the true moment when studying finally becomes speaking. Fluency doesn't begin the day you learn more English. It begins the day you start using the English you already know. That is the missing step between studying and speaking. From today, don't measure your progress by how many grammar rules you've finished or how many new words you've memorized. Measure it by how often you think, respond, and communicate in English, even if it's not perfect. Every real conversation, every small sentence, and every mistake is moving you one step closer to fluency. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and trust the process. One day, you'll look back and realize that English stopped feeling like something you studied and became a language you simply speak. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.